Chapter 57. Along the way, Yu Qianqiu was still wondering what the spirit-nurturing grass was for. And who was that Ma Jiugu? She must be someone extraordinary for Elder Fei, who was in charge of Myriad Fragrance Garden, to call her aunt. Thinking about this, he felt slightly nervous. The female disciple who led the way at the side sized Yu Qianqiu up from time to time. Naturally, it wasn't because she had taken a fancy to him. With his ordinary appearance that was at the bottom of the pile of ordinary people, there were probably very few people that would take a fancy to him. She was also wondering who this person was. Elder Fei personally borrowed him from the alchemy pavilion. Why did he make him do the work of nurturing the spirit herbs? The female disciple suddenly recalled a rumor a few days ago. There was an itinerant cultivator who entered supporting Immortal Island with an immortal supporting medallion. He was the disciple of Alchemy Pavilion's Elder Guan. It was said that dozens of elders fought fiercely for the immortal supporting medallion. In the end, it was Elder Guan who obtained the immortal supporting medallion. That itinerant cultivator's name was Yu Qianqiu. Could it be this person? Thinking about this, the doubts in her heart were easily resolved. When she looked at Yu Qianqiu again, a trace of pity appeared in her eyes. Yu Qianqiu felt gloomy. He looked at the scenery of Myriad Fragrance Garden to relieve his worries. There were all kinds of spirit herbs planted all around the garden. Smelling the refreshing fragrance, there were many beauties working in the garden. There were all kinds of terrains in the Wanfen Garden. There were high hills, low depressions, and flat lands, and all kinds of spiritual herbs were planted everywhere. There were also many flowers and fruits. The colorful spiritual herbs swayed in the breeze. Occasionally, when the wind was strong, the hem of a skirt would be blown up, and a delicate hand would be pressed down. It made one's imagination run wild. What a great place! It turned out that spiritual herbs and beauties were also a pretty good scenery. Yu Qianqiu's worries eased a lot. At the same time, he couldn't help but admire the eyesight of the major sects in the cultivation world when it came to accepting disciples. Not all of the female disciples were outstanding beauties, but because they all cultivated their bones, their appearances were much better than ordinary mortals. Of course, not everyone with a good bone structure had a good appearance. There were some people who were ugly but talented, but they were in the minority. All in all, as far as the eye could see, the spiritual herbs were all pretty girls. There were also women who were in their prime, and were slightly more mature and alluring. Yu Qianqiu was a little absent-minded as he wondered if he had arrived at Womanland. They arrived at the foot of a mountain. It wasn't really a mountain, but it was at most a slightly higher hill. However, it occupied quite a large area. There were very few trees around the hill, and most of them were covered by various kinds of spirit herbs. The entire hilltop was occupied by an antique courtyard. It was obvious that it was a building that had existed for a long time. Although Yu Qianqiu's cultivation level was not high, along the way, he noticed that the spiritual energy nurtured by this mountain was the most abundant. The spiritual energy had already condensed into a faint mist. The female disciple stopped and reminded him, Yu Qianqiu, this hilltop is the residence of consecrated Aunt Jiu. Consecrated Aunt Jiu doesn't like noise, so don't make too much noise later. Yu Qianqiu thought that she was reminding him out of kindness, but from the faint fear on her face, he could see that she was afraid that he would implicate her. The two of them were not familiar with each other, let alone a woman, so he didn't mind. He looked at the building on the hilltop and asked, Is consecrated Aunt Jiu the Ma Jiu that Elder Fei mentioned? Lower your voice. The female disciple seemed to be startled by his words. Ma Jiugu is not someone we can call, she said in a soft voice. Elder Fei only calls her that in front of us, but he would never dare to call her that in front of Reverend Jiugu. Consecrated Aunt Jiu used to be the aunt of the former sect leader, and also the previous elder, who presided over Wanfen Garden. Her cultivation level has reached the late stage of passing calamity, and even the current sect leader has to greet her and call her Aunt Jiu. Yu Qianqiu replied with an, "Oh," and looked at the hilltop. He thought, so it's Ferdinand who wants to save face. But why did he send me to the old monster's place? Does he want to use the old monster to kill me? He wondered who would be stronger in a fight between the old monster and his sister. Both of them were in the late stage of passing calamity. Let's go, the female disciple said. Yu Qianqiu nodded. He had originally wanted to get close to her and ask her what her name was. But seeing how timid she was and how she could barely be considered a beauty, he gave up on that thought. Going up the bluestone stairs to the hilltop and standing outside the wall, Yu Qianqiu found that the courtyard was really big and the wall was really high. The tall courtyard gate was open, and there was no one guarding the gate. He raised his head and looked at the 3 big words Mulberry Garden engraved on the top of the courtyard gate. Then, he followed the respectful female disciple and quietly walked in. As soon as he entered, for some reason, Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt that the surrounding temperature dropped a lot. The inside of the wall and the outside seemed to be 2 different worlds. Walking through the dark courtyard surrounded by trees and green vines, his eyes suddenly opened up. There were all kinds of strange flowers and plants. There were actually mini gardens inside, and they were also planted with spirit herbs. In each garden, there were 1 or 2 young girls working. Fortunately, the appearance of the young girls here seemed to be a grade higher than what he saw outside. A beautiful and dignified woman greeted the 2 of them with a smile. The female disciple hurriedly bowed and said, "Elder Lan." This made Yu Qianqiu also bow. That elder Lan smiled and said, "What brings you here?" The female disciple pointed at Yu Qianqiu and replied, "This person is a disciple that Elder Fei borrowed from the alchemy pavilion. His name is Yu Qianqiu. Elder Fei said that he will be sent to Jiugu to worship the spirit herb." Yu Qianqiu, spirit herb? Elder Lan was stunned. Her eyes paused on Yu Qianqiu and then she frowned and said, "What the hell is Fei Dinan doing? All right, leave him to me. You can go back." Yes. The female disciple obeyed and left. After listening to their conversation, Yu Qianqiu only felt uncomfortable and secretly cursed in his heart. Damn. Since when did I become a thing that can be sent here and there? You come with me. Elder Lan smiled. Yes. Yu Qianqiu obeyed the order and followed her. As they passed through several spirit herb gardens, Yu Qianqiu thought to himself that the spirit herbs planted here were definitely more precious than those planted outside. He couldn't help but look around, and to his surprise, he discovered that he had seen many of the spirit herbs in the pill recipe jade archive. He followed the woman to a courtyard. Once he entered the courtyard, he suddenly felt that the temperature had dropped a lot. He saw a well in front of him. When he walked past the well, he felt even more bone-chilling cold. Yu Qianqiu shivered from the cold. Although his cultivation level wasn't high, it was not a problem for him to be impervious to heat and cold. He didn't expect this small well to be so powerful. It was as if the temperature of the entire mountaintop was low because of this well. He couldn't help but glance at the well. The water wasn't deep, and he could see it by tilting his head. Strangely, even though the temperature was so low, the well water didn't freeze. It gave the courtyard an even greater sense of mystery. In the courtyard, a white-haired old woman was holding a young and beautiful girl's hand as she spoke. When Yu Qianqiu saw the girl, he was stunned. It was Yan Zixia, whom he had parted ways with not too long ago. Why was she here? He felt strange. When he got closer, he realized that the old woman's face was full of pockmarks. He couldn't help but think of the Majugu that Elder Fei had mentioned. The old woman turned her head and swept a glance at Yu Qianqiu. Her calm gaze actually made the latter's heart palpitate. She opened her mouth and spoke in an aged voice. "Little Lan, who did you bring here?" Yan Zixia was obviously curious as to why Yu Qianqiu would be here. The 2 of them nodded at each other. Chapter 58. Hearing the old lady's question, Elder Lan pouted like a little girl and muttered, "Ferdinand sent someone to deliver it to you. He said it's for you to grow spirit herbs. It's simply nonsense." Elder Lan's words proved that the old lady in front of them was Majugu. But looking at the way she spoke, she was full of worry and disgust. She didn't look like the beautiful and dignified woman from before. Thinking that most of the elders in Fuxian Island were over 200 years old, a woman over 200 years old acting like a spoiled little girl, it made people shudder. He quickly stepped forward and saluted. "Yu Qianqiu greets Elder Jugu." Yu Qianqiu? Ma Jugu seemed to have heard of his name and was stunned. You're the individual cultivator Yu Qianqiu, who joined Fuxian Island with the immortal supporting token. Yes, I am. Didn't I hear that Guan Weiwu accepted you as his disciple? Why did Ferdinand send you here? Are you Qi refining level 10? Strange, I can't see through your cultivation. Elder Lan said angrily. It must be because of the immortal supporting token. The dignified elder in charge of Wanfen Garden is actually so narrow-minded. How could she do such a thing? Elder Jugu, you don't even care. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. Perhaps there was hope of returning to the alchemy pavilion. Damn, if he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have made things so awkward with Yin Shu. Impulsiveness was the devil. Is that so? Ma Jugu expressed doubt and laughed. Ferdinand is your man. If you want to care, you do it. I won't care. Then, he changed the topic and said cautiously. However, he is the elder in charge of the 10,000 Fragrance Garden now. Regardless of the seniority of anyone in the 10,000 Fragrance Garden, Ferdinand's words are the law. I have to obey this rule. Lan Las, do as Ferdinand says and take him away. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's little thoughts that just jumped out sank again. Yes, Elder Lan felt very wronged. Behind her, there was another person who felt even more wronged than her. Of course it was Yu Qianqiu. When he walked out of the courtyard, he vaguely heard Yin Zixie's voice. She seemed to be calling someone great-grandmother. Was it Ma Jugu? In the blink of an eye, Elder Lan turned back into that beautiful and dignified woman. She went outside, and threw Yu Qianqiu to a female disciple named Furong. After giving a few instructions she left. Yu Qianqiu was depressed. This was the first time in his previous life, and this life that he had been sold out so many times in one day. Although he was depressed, this big sister Furong was really unbearable. She looked so thin that she couldn't even withstand a gust of wind. Half of her face was covered by a scar. If one looked at the other half of her face, and looked at her figure from the back, she would feel like Zhao Fian, who fought against Yang Guifei. She was thin and fat. She was a thin beauty, but one couldn't look at her from the front. Otherwise it would scare people. The clothes she was wearing were a lot older than the clothes of the other Fuxian Island disciples. There were even patches on her shoulders, and a small cloth bag was hanging diagonally on her body. Strange. When Furong saw his gaze, she was actually a little evasive. She seemed a little timid. After joining the cultivation world for so long, this was the first time he saw someone afraid of him. He immediately came to his senses. This girl with half a face either had low self-esteem, or was a vicious person pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Yu Qianqiu bowed and said, I am Yu Qianqiu, Qi Refinement Level 10. Greetings, big sister. Ah. Half a face Furong was a little flustered. She hurriedly bowed and said, Fu. Furong Foundation Establishment Late Stage. Greetings, Mr. Yu. Foundation Establishment Late Stage. And you still call me Mr.? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He bowed and said, I don't dare. So it's Martial Uncle. Furong was a little uneasy from being called that. She said timidly, Elder Lan told me to hand over the matter of raising spirit herbs in the mulberry grass garden to you. Come with me. After saying that, she turned around and left in a hurry. This back view. It's a pity that face. Yu Qianqiu shook his head regretfully. Outside a small room filled with junk, there were 2 buckets, a shoulder pole, and a long ladle. These were the 3 things that Furong gave him. Yu Qianqiu looked at Furong, who was standing at the side as if she had done something wrong. He then looked at the 3 things suspiciously. These 3 things were very familiar. It was a very familiar combination. However, he couldn't remember where he had seen them before. Martial Uncle Furong, are these for me? What are they for? Yu Qianqiu frowned and asked. Spirit raising grass. Furong's voice was almost inaudible. Oh, Yu Qianqiu smiled embarrassedly and said, Hee hee. Martial Uncle, I just entered the sect not long ago. This hee hee. I really don't know what this spirit raising grass is for. Please enlighten me, Martial Uncle. Then come with me. Furong said in a low voice. She reached out her hand to take the 3 spirit raising grass. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly stopped her and said, Let me do it. No need to trouble Martial Uncle. He could now see that this disfigured young Martial Uncle was really timid and shy. However, it didn't mean that he didn't know how to read the situation. The 3 items were snatched by him. He carried 2 buckets on his shoulder with a pole, and a long ladle was placed horizontally on the pole. He smiled and said, "Marshal uncle, please." Furong shyly nodded her head. Her 2 small hands held onto the corner of her clothes, turning it over and over without letting go. She led Yu Qianqiu to the outside of the courtyard and walked along the tall wall for a full 10 minutes before stopping. There was a small ditch under the wall that was connected to a small pool in front of them. The yellowish-brown liquid in the pool gave off an unpleasant smell. The thing floating on it was basically something that everyone was familiar with, feces. To put it bluntly, the pool in front of them was a cesspool filled with feces and urine. Yu Qianqiu looked at the cesspool in front of him, as if he was struck by lightning. His eyes widened. There was no need to explain. There was no need to explain anything. He understood everything. He was born in the countryside in his previous life. How could he not understand? The scene of farmers working hard and fertilizing crops in his previous life appeared in his mind. Spirit raising grass? Fertilizing spirit raising grass with human feces and urine? Spirit raising grass with human feces and urine? Spirit raising grass with human feces and urine? How could spirit raising grass absorb this? Yu Qianqiu's face first turned pale, then red, then green, then black. He was already showing signs of going berserk. No wonder these 3 things looked familiar at first. They were used for this. Furong, who was at the side, was so scared that she took a few steps back. Yu Qianqiu could be heard shouting with a choked throat, F***CK. Raising bullsh *T spirit raising grass. Ferdinand, you have guts. You want me to carry feces? The things on his shoulder were thrown to the ground. Looking at Yu Qianqiu, whose eyes were red and who was panting, Furong's hands clenched the corner of her clothes tightly. Her delicate knuckles were white, and there were tears at the corner of her eyes. She said with a slightly choked voice, "Mr. Yu, you don't have to be angry. This is what I'm doing anyway. You don't have to do it. I won't tell Elder Lan. You can rest at the side." She carefully moved over and slowly squatted down. Her pale little hands picked up the things on the ground and put them away. Chapter 59. Scram. You damn B***tch. What are you swinging your tattered face in front of Lousy for? Ugly freak. I don't want you to be a good person. So go to the side and die for Lousy. Yu Qianqiu's face was filled with rage. With one kick, he sent the bucket that Hibiscus was holding up flying. Once again he angrily shouted, "Scram." The latter was so frightened that she trembled as she stood to the side. Her tattered clothes wrapped around her thin and weak body slightly curled up. On one half of her moving face, and the other half of her frightening face, soybean-sized teardrops dripped down. But she didn't dare to cry out loud. This was the first time he had suffered such a great humiliation since he came to this world. In addition, he was indeed a temperamental person. When he wasn't provoked, he was willing to be a tortoise's grandson. But once he was angered, not to mention this pitiful older sister Hibiscus, who was only at foundation building stage, in Ong Kwang Sung, he even cursed Wu Baru, who was at nascent soul stage. Earlier Yen Shu, who was at core formation stage, was an example. Looking at Hibiscus's tattered face in front of him, the more he looked at it, the more he felt it was disgusting. In his anger, he didn't care about the difference in their cultivation levels, nor did he care about whether or not he could defeat Hibiscus. Instead, step by step, he forced his way over and viciously cursed. "Cry. You only know how to cry. What are you crying for? Why don't you take a look at your appearance? Damn Yin and Yang face, ugly freak. The more you cry, the uglier you look. Go to hell." The pitiful Hibiscus was forced to lean against the wall by him step by step. Hearing him curse her viciously, but he didn't let her cry, she really did force back her tears. Sparkling and translucent tears rolled in her eyes, looking very pitiful. If one looked carefully, they would discover that although Hibiscus's face was disfigured, her eyes were exceptionally bright and beautiful. Although they were covered in tears, there was gentleness and kindness in her pitiful eyes. It was unknown whether she was really stupid, cowardly, or really kind. Based on her cultivation level, beating up Yu Qianqiu was like chopping vegetables, but she meekly accepted it. Just like that, an average-looking man forced an ugly, weak woman into a corner. The two of them stared at each other, one furious, the other delicate and pitiful. After a long time, seeing that Yu Qianqiu's anger seemed to have subsided a little, Hibiscus loosened her hand, that was tightly gripping the corner of her clothes, and pointed at the manure pit. She said timidly and softly, "I'm going to work. If I'm late, I'll make Elder Lan unhappy." Actually, Hibiscus's voice was quite pleasant to listen to. Her voice was thin and neat, and her pearly white teeth moved up and down. Her faint words really had the effect of relieving heat. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Was his voice a little too loud just now? Did the old man in the courtyard hear him? He was a little impulsive. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Hibiscus carefully moved out with her back rubbing against the wall. She picked up the wooden barrel that Yu Qianqiu had kicked far away, and carefully put it back. Her eyes occasionally glanced at him, clearly still a little afraid of him. He then took out a white pill from the slanted cloth bag, and tossed it into the cesspool. Tossing a pill into the cesspool, Yu Qianqiu seemed to have forgotten that he was still angry, and watched curiously. As the pill sank into the cesspool, it instantly reacted and began to bubble. The yellowish-brown substance surged in the pool, making Yu Qianqiu feel disgusted and a little nauseous. He could bear it when the thing in the cesspool was not moving, but when it moved, it was really not something that ordinary people could bear. Although he came from a remote village, that was already a long time ago. On the other hand, Hibiscus calmly stood at the side. There was no abnormality on her face. Yu Qianqiu's nostrils flared. Strange. The smell that was originally in the depths of his memory did not appear. Instead, there was a faint fragrance. It must be the effect of the pill. He wanted to get closer to see what was going on. But no matter how fragrant it was still feces. He was still unwilling to get closer. Hibiscus gently rolled up her worn-out sleeves, revealing two small, sparkling, white, and tender arms. She grabbed a long scoop, and began to pour the feces into two wooden barrels. Yu Qianqiu secretly thought that it was a pity that such beautiful hands were used for this. Hibiscus, however, was calm and composed. Once it was filled, Hibiscus inserted the carrying pole between the two barrels. Her slender body gently bent down, and the hard carrying pole landed on her thin and small shoulders. With a slight effort, the two barrels of feces were picked up by this weak woman. Before she left, she glanced at Yu Qianqiu with a lonely gaze, as if she was comforting him. "Don't be angry, just rest here. I'll do it." That gaze, in an instant, Yu Qianqiu felt something in his chest shatter. Is it a broken heart? No, but I feel my heart ache. Strange, what am I feeling heartache for? I'm not familiar with her. Yu Qianqiu asked himself. Hibiscus's thin and weak body swayed forward while carrying the carrying pole. With her cultivation level, carrying such a load was a piece of cake. But looking at her thin and small figure and the two barrels, it seemed incongruous. Were the barrels too big? Or was Hibiscus's figure too thin and small? For some reason, as he watched the steady swaying of the carrying pole, Yu Qianqiu felt an inexplicable pain in his heart. "Wait!" Yu Qianqiu shouted and ran over. Hearing the shout, Hibiscus turned around while carrying the carrying pole. When she saw Yu Qianqiu running over, she was so frightened that she took 2 steps back. The yellow-brown liquid in the barrels immediately swayed and splashed on the ground. Some of it landed on Hibiscus's shoes and the edge of her tattered skirt. "Give it to me." Yu Qianqiu expressionlessly reached out his hand towards the carrying pole. "No need." Hibiscus's slender body refused while carrying the carrying pole. "Give it to me." Yu Qianqiu reached out his hand again. "It's dirty," Hibiscus said softly. "If you're not afraid of it, why should I be afraid? Quickly give it to me." I'm used to doing it, I'm not afraid of it." Yu Qianqiu's heart tightened again. He exhaled and said, "Did you forget Elder Lan's instructions? You don't even listen to Elder Lan anymore? Do you want me to be punished?" Speaking of Elder Lan, a trace of fear appeared on Hibiscus's face. She didn't know what to do. Without hesitation, Yu Qianqiu reached out his hand and forcibly placed the carrying pole on his shoulder. He turned his head and said with a smile, "You just need to teach me how to do it. Help me hold this and lead the way." As he said this, he handed her the long ladle. Holding the ladle, Hibiscus nodded helplessly. Then she hurriedly led the way. Yu Qianqiu didn't find the big feces disgusting anymore. He tried his best to control the swaying of the two barrels. When the two returned to the courtyard, Hibiscus led him to the garden where the spiritual herbs were planted. She shyly taught him how to fertilize the spiritual herbs. She originally wanted to do it herself, but in the end, Yu Qianqiu refused. He only needed her to do it with her mouth. He would take care of everything that had to be done. Yu Qianqiu cooperated with Hibiscus with unprecedented meekness. Wherever Hibiscus pointed, he would obediently do it. The other beauties who were taking care of the spiritual herbs in the garden were all shocked. The ugly Hibiscus actually found a man to help her. There were a lot of spiritual herbs that needed to be fertilized. The small manure pit outside the wall was simply not enough. Hibiscus led him down the mountain to the place where the female disciples of Wanfen Garden lived. There was a place similar to a public toilet. There were many manure pits. The female cultivator's ability to excrete wasn't weak. Yu Qianqiu almost fainted. He never thought that there would be a day where he would come to the women's toilet to pick the fertilizers offered by women. What made him even more incredulous was that there were many ant-level seniors who actually had to fight over the feces. Fighting over the feces with ants? He couldn't help but sigh. The area of spiritual herbs planted in Wanfen Garden wasn't just big. The fertilizers were in short supply. Chapter 60. The aunties were all fat and strong. Even as a man, Yu Qianqiu couldn't compare to their burly bodies. After asking Furong, he found out that these people were people who had broken through Aura Training Realm and reached Foundation Building Realm. Because they had reached Foundation Building Realm, they had avoided the fate of being expelled from Fuxian Island. However, they couldn't break through to Foundation Building Realm again, so they had been lingering at this cultivation level and didn't have much of a future. Therefore, they were assigned to the lowest level of work. The aunties who were carrying the manure buckets looked at the crowded aunties who were very busy. People came and went, and Yu Qianqiu stood among them. As a man, he was too embarrassed to steal their business. Furong shrunk behind him and didn't have the slightest intention of stealing. After waiting for a long time, almost everyone had left. Yu Qianqiu walked to the side of the pool to take a look, and his face immediately twitched. The pool was so dry that the bottom could be seen. The two of them carried their tools and visited a few more manure pits, and they were all the same as before. This martial Aunt Cho had a weak figure and was shy. She wouldn't steal like those aunties, so he really didn't know how she completed her task of fertilizing. He couldn't help but ask, "Martial Aunt Furong, there isn't enough fertilizer on the mountain, and it's hard to get it here. How do you complete your daily task?" Furong softly said, "I don't need to fertilize every day. I just need to water them once every 3 days. Being too diligent is bad for the spiritual herbs. I had to rush here a few hours before daybreak to get here." She brought Yu Qianqiu here because she originally thought that as a man, he would definitely win against those aunties, who knew that Yu Qianqiu was as shy as her and too embarrassed to steal. Yu Qianqiu was silent, but the scene that appeared in his mind was a thin and weak woman carrying manure up the mountain in the dark. Actually, he really wanted to ask, weren't foundation building cultivators able to fly on their swords? Why didn't they fly? But thinking about it, if everyone carried manure and flew on their swords, although the scene would be spectacular, it would definitely incur the wrath of the heavens and the resentment of the people. The steward of Fuxian Island definitely wouldn't agree. Since watering the plants once every 3 days was considered to have completed the task, it didn't matter if he didn't pick any now. He could come back tomorrow morning before the sun rose. One of them carried an empty manure bucket, while the other carried a manure ladle as they walked back. Next to a small stream at the foot of the mountain, Hibiscus washed the tools used to raise spirit herbs until they were completely clean. Then, she carefully washed both of her fair and tender little hands. Although this girl didn't look good and didn't dress well, she was a hard-working ugly girl who loved cleanliness. If it had been Yu Qianqiu, he would have thrown the bucket to the side when he reached the top of the mountain. Anyway, he would have to continue filling the bucket tomorrow. When he returned to the mulberry garden, he found a problem. Yu Qianqiu didn't have a place to stay. Yu Qianqiu, whose anger was about to flare up again, gradually calmed down when he saw Furong's residence. It was the place where he used to raise spirit herbs and other tools. In the room where the miscellaneous items were stored, there was an empty space. 2 wooden boards were placed on top of 2 stools. This was Furong's bed. Looking at this narrow space, he really couldn't understand. In his previous life, it was said that many people couldn't afford to buy a house because of the high housing prices. Could it be that this phenomenon also existed in the cultivation world? This was too unimaginable. However, the other people in Fuxian Island weren't like this. Even Ling Feng and the other 2, who were the worst in the alchemy pavilion, had a small courtyard to live in. There should be a lot of empty rooms in this mulberry garden. This martial Uncle Cho should have a story that he didn't know. Everything showed that she was being abused. In his previous life, it was said that if one didn't have money, one wouldn't be able to buy a house to live in. This place shouldn't be the same if one was ugly. When Furong returned, she seemed to have calmed down. She didn't have the uneasiness she had when she was outside. She calmly told him that she had lived here since she was 5 or 6 years old. She had already lived here for 15 years. She also told Yu Qianqiu that this place was very quiet. Her cultivation talent was quite good. In just a short dozen years, she had reached the late stage of foundation establishment. This was considered rare in the cultivation world. However, could it be that she had offended someone when she was young? Otherwise, she wouldn't have been beaten up like this. This didn't make sense. A 5 or 6-year-old child, who could she offend? Who would bother with a wimpy kid? While Yu Qianqiu was feeling puzzled, Furong had already started to tidy up the room. She squeezed her own bed to the side and dug out a stool and a wooden board from the pile of junk. Then, she laid out a new wooden bed next to her bed. That was the only empty space left. After cleaning up, she dug out a set of tattered bedding and laid it out. Then, she pulled a piece of cloth between the 2 beds. It was a little like the Chu Hihan boundary. In the end, she foolishly told him that he could make do with it here. This was how she treated her guests. Looking at her, it seemed that having a bed like this was good enough. Yu Qianqiu really suspected that she had never seen how the other people in Fuxian Island lived. However, she was really confident in her own looks. She knew that if she stayed in the same room as another man, she wouldn't have to worry about that man molesting her. That night, Yu Qianqiu didn't do anything beastly. In fact, he didn't even have the slightest thought. He asked Furong many questions in a roundabout way, wanting to understand more about the mulberry garden. In the end, it was as if he didn't ask. Furong knew almost nothing. He could only lie down and sleep soundly. Before daybreak, the 2 of them dragged their things down the mountain. Fortunately, there was moonlight in the sky. In addition, they had cultivated, so their eyesight was much better than ordinary people. Otherwise, going up and down the mountain in the dark would really be a dangerous thing. Their goal was naturally the female toilet. Sure enough, there was a lot of harvest. Yu Qianqiu carried the bucket of dung and quickly ran back up the mountain. He dumped the harvest outside the wall into his own territory and quickly ran down the mountain. This round trip probably took nearly 2 hours. He carried 4 loads of dung. Seeing that the sky was already slightly bright, he finally stopped. Yu Qianqiu discovered that stealing dung from the female toilet in the middle of the night was a very exciting and very successful thing. He was actually a little excited. In the past, he probably never thought that he would have such a day. If his subordinates from his previous life knew that Big Brother had done this, how would they feel? After the 2 of them had a successful cooperation, the distance between them gradually narrowed by a lot. In the next few days, Yu Qianqiu was pleasantly surprised to discover that Furong seemed to have an extraordinary interest in spiritual plants. She might be afraid of other things, but as long as it was related to spiritual plants, she wouldn't be afraid of anyone. She wouldn't be ashamed to ask questions. As long as it was a spiritual plant on Fuxian Island, she could recite its location and its various habits, as if she was very familiar with it. He didn't expect this ugly girl to have this kind of ability. He had really picked up a treasure. Yu Qianqiu was secretly happy. A few days ago, he saw a few familiar spiritual plants in the mulberry garden. They were precisely the spiritual plants required for the foundation building pill. in the pill formula Jade archive. At that time, his heart was thumping hard for a long time. A bold plan formed in his mind. He would think of a way to collect the seeds of these spiritual plants and plant them in the golden pearl space. Relying on the miraculous effect of the purple chaos, he believed that it wouldn't be long before he could produce a large amount of spiritual plants needed to concoct the foundation-building pill. If he had an inexhaustible supply of spiritual plants on hand, he could definitely try to concoct the pill himself. However, what made him feel discouraged was that after carefully searching for a few days, there were only 5 types of spiritual plants required for the foundation-building pill in the entire mulberry garden. He was still missing 4. There was no other way. He could only wait for the Fuxian Island to distribute the foundation-building pill once every 3 years before attempting to build his foundation. Who would have thought that he would wear out iron shoes in fruitless search, and then find it by chance without even looking for it? After trying to ask, the ugly girl next to him unexpectedly knew where the other 4 types of spiritual plants could be found in the myriad fragrance garden. This was truly something worth being happy about. He didn't even consider whether he could get his hands on them or not. In his mind, there were only things that he didn't want or didn't know where. There was nothing that he couldn't get his hands on. Chapter 61. Everything was good in this world, but it didn't have the variety of entertainment in his previous world. At night, it was even more torturous. Yu Qianqiu had been carrying it for a few years, and had slowly gotten used to it. However, Furong's room didn't even have a single light source. He really didn't know how she had survived for so many years. There were a lot of fluorescent stones in the golden bead space. Initially, he wanted to take a few out for illumination, but after thinking about it, he decided against it. The light emitted by the fluorite was already a bit blue. He was afraid that if the light shone on Hibiscus's face, he would be so scared that he wouldn't be able to sleep. Tonight, he climbed up to the roof and counted the stars. He looked at the small dark room under his butt, and then looked at the other places where people lived. They were all brightly lit. It was really enviable. So he sighed and went back to his nest in the dark. He saw that Furong was still sitting cross-legged on the bed cultivating. Unfortunately, he was restricted by the aura refining realm and was unable to cultivate. After thinking it over, he felt that he should ask her about the whereabouts of the spiritual herb tonight. With this girl's intelligence, she shouldn't suspect anything. Hiding under the blanket, he took out the jade disc containing the pill formula. He felt that it was still better to be safe than sorry. He had to confirm the spiritual herbs in the pill formula for the foundation establishment pill. He must not make a mistake. Infusing his spiritual sense into the jade plate, Zhang Xian soon found the recipe for the foundation establishment pill. Heart-guarding orchid diamond fruit, tendon forging grass, ice spirit seed, gold fusion grass, 100-year ginseng, 100-year lingji, dirt-removing grass, spirit-gathering grass. If he remembered correctly, it was the 9-scented spirit grass. Who would have thought that the 100-year-old ginseng and reishi mushroom could also be considered as spiritual grasses? Only the first 5 species were found in the mulberry garden. Senior Aunt Furong. Yu Qianqiu kept the jade archive and called out to the other end of the tattered curtain. Hibiscus also stopped. Does our mulberry garden have 100-year-old ginseng and 100-year-old Ganoderma? Furong asked curiously. No, but these are the ones planted in the forest behind the mulberry garden. Not only are there 100-year ginseng, there are even close to 1,000-year-old ginseng. Some of the ginseng are probably about to turn into spirits. F*CK, there's even the legendary 1,000-year-old ginseng. Yu Qianqiu was excited when he heard that. He sat up and said, there must be a lot. There are quite a few 100-year ones, but only a few 1,000-year ones. Haha, I heard that that thing is very nutritious. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, when I have time, I'll get some to eat. Hibiscus chuckled a few times and said, ginseng and Ganoderma are common herbs even in the secular world. You don't need to spend much effort to grow them. Their rarity lies in their age. Usually, those that are over 100 years old can be included in the category of spiritual herbs. For us cultivators, Eating ginseng and ganoderma, that are more than 100 years old directly is a waste. Refining them into pills is the best way to consume them. I'm just saying. Yu Qianqiu laughed mischievously and asked, does the mulberry garden have dirt-removing grass and spirit-gathering grass? There's none in the garden. The two biggest plots of land outside the garden at the foot of the mountain are planted with dirt-dispelling grass and spirit-gathering grass. Hibiscus paused for a moment, then explained, these two kinds of spiritual herbs are necessary for concocting medicinal pills. The dirt-dispelling grass could remove the impurities in the elixir, and the spirit-gathering grass could lock the elixir's spiritual qi and medicinal effects, so that they wouldn't leak out. They were spirit herbs that were used in almost all elixirs. They were used in large quantities, so they were the most commonly planted spiritual herbs in the myriad fragrance garden. It turned out that there were spiritual herbs used to concoct foundation-building pills all around, but he didn't find them. It seemed that he had to walk around when he had time. Yu Qianqiu sighed and said, there are so many spiritual herbs in the myriad fragrance garden. You must have spent a lot of effort to collect them. Hibiscus replied, yes. In the outside world, our supporting Immortals Island's disciples have been searching for all kinds of rare and precious spiritual herbs for a long time. After collecting different spiritual herbs, our myriad fragrance garden will cultivate seeds and then plant them in large quantities. For example, our mulberry garden's consecrated Jugu is in charge of all kinds of spiritual herb seeds. As long as it's a spiritual herb in the myriad fragrance garden, she has seeds in her hands. Ma Jugu has seeds of all kinds of spiritual herbs? Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's heart jumped. He swallowed his saliva and asked, since she has so many seeds, why doesn't the mulberry garden have many kinds of spiritual herbs? Hibiscus explained, the mulberry garden is in charge of cultivating seeds of all kinds of spiritual herbs. It's not a place to plant large quantities of spiritual herbs. Only the more precious or rare spiritual herbs are planted in the mulberry garden. Yu Qianqiu didn't speak, but his mind was quickly turning. It was really troublesome that the seeds of spiritual herbs were in Ma Jugu's hands. The key was that he didn't know her at all. Not to mention that old woman was at the late stage of crossing tribulation. It would be difficult to get something from her hands. Just thinking about it made his teeth hurt. Hibiscus wasn't someone who took the initiative to speak. Seeing Yu Qianqiu tossing and turning on the bed without saying anything, she naturally didn't say anything. But she didn't know that the latter was worrying about the seeds. She recalled the scene when she saw Ma Jugu that day. Just a glance from her made her heart jump. She was really difficult to deal with. But that day, Yan Zixia seemed to be very intimate with her. Strange. How could a new disciple like her be so familiar with Ma Jugu? That's right, when I came out, I heard her call out great-grandmother. Who was she calling? There were only a few people at that time. Apart from Ma Jugu, who else could it be? The two of them were relatives. Yu Qianqiu woke up from the bed and sat up. If they weren't relatives, there was no reason for Ma Jugu to be so intimate with Yan Zixia in this cold cultivation world. It couldn't be because she liked Yan Zixia's beauty. Yu Qianqiu suddenly understood and slowly lay down again. His mind fell on Yan Zixia. Hibiscus didn't know what he was doing, so she got up and lay down in surprise. As the saying goes, hope is beautiful, but reality is always cruel. Ever since Yu Qianqiu arrived at the mulberry garden, he could be seen carrying a bucket of manure, even before the sun rose. Such days passed. In order to get the seeds of spiritual herbs, he put his mind on Yan Zixia. He often wandered around the gate of the middle courtyard, hoping to meet her and make a connection. Unfortunately, he didn't get what he wanted. Several days passed, but Yan Zixia seemed to have disappeared from the mulberry garden. He didn't even see her shadow. The spiritual herbs in the formula of the foundation-building pill in the mulberry garden were very tempting. Every time he passed by intentionally or unintentionally, he wanted to secretly pull a few. However, he found that there were eyes everywhere in the seemingly spacious environment, so he had no chance to do it. Later, he put his mind on the spiritual herb field at the foot of the mountain, but he also had no chance to do it. He ran to the woods in the back of the mountain to dig some 100-year-old ginseng and 100-year-old lingji. But before he entered the woods, he was driven out and severely warned. After trying a few times, he didn't dare to try again. If he tried again, he would be suspected, so he could only wait for the opportunity to come. There was a secluded valley in Wanfenyuan, where there was a small river leading to the sea. There was a kind of silver-white fish in the river. After Yu Qianqiu caught and ate it once, he found that the fish tasted exceptionally delicious. Since then, he would come here to fish whenever he had time. From then on, the smell of grilled fish often wafted from the corners of the mulberry garden. After Furong ate his unique grilled fish, although she didn't say it, it was obvious that she liked it very much. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed, and there was no sign of him going back to the alchemy pavilion. It was not a good thing to go back. The dead knot between him and Yin Shu hadn't been untied. In this way, Yu Qianqiu, who was waiting for an opportunity, lived a very regular life every day. Early in the morning, he went to the women's toilet to pick feces. In the morning he fertilized the spiritual herbs, and in passing, he tried his luck at the gate of the courtyard. In the afternoon, he went fishing and came back to grill fish. Occasionally, he would go back to the Golden Pearl, and encourage Chen Feng to resume his old business, and work hard to improve his talisman-making skills. Guan Yu also often asked him how he was doing in Fuxian Island, but he would never tell him the real situation, even if he was beaten to death. After all, picking feces for a year was not a glorious thing. He didn't want anyone in the Golden Pearl to know about it. If it was spread out, it would be too damaging to his boss Yu's reputation. Day after day, when he was really depressed, he saw that there were many beautiful women in the mulberry garden. He also wanted to tease a younger sister or elder sister to relieve his boredom, but they didn't even have the interest to let him approach them. Late at night, Yu Qianqiu hid under the quilt and cried sadly, "Brother is so lonely." Chapter 62. Under the hard work of Guan Yu and Chen Feng, large areas of the Golden Pearl were planted with fresh flowers. Looking around, it was like a sea of flowers, and the fragrance of fresh flowers permeated the air. The sea of flowers was surrounded by a forest, and from the bamboo house came the moving sound of a zither. Listening to the zither, the busy Guan Yu and Chen Feng seemed to be enjoying it very much. Standing in the sea of flowers, the white fox's white clothes fluttered. When she heard the sound of the zither, she raised her hand and tucked a strand of hair behind her delicate ear. She turned her head to look in the direction of the bamboo house, and a smile appeared on her beautiful face. For the past year, Yu Qianqiu would take time to come to the Golden Pearl every day. Although he came with a smile every time, the white fox could see that he seemed to be hiding some bitterness in his heart. But when facing the three of them, he would always force a smile. In the bamboo pavilion, on the zither platform, the white fox rarely played the 7-string zither, and it became his pastime. Every time he came, he would randomly play for a while. It should be the legendary, playing the zither randomly, and the noise made by his playing made the other three feel unbearable pain. In the end, the white fox could not stand it anymore. Seeing that he was in a bad mood, she did not want to restrain him, so she decided to teach him personally. The white fox was a fox spirit who had played the zither for hundreds of years, and her zither skills were naturally superb. No matter how stupid Yu Qianqiu was, it was no problem for him to teach her. Day after day, Yu Qianqiu's zither skills could not be said to be as superb as the white fox's, but he could definitely be regarded as a good player. In the past, this was something that Yu Qianqiu did not even dare to think about. Who could let him hold a 7-stringed log and practice the zither in peace? This might be the so-called misfortune, maybe a blessing in disguise. When Yu Qianqiu played all kinds of beautiful songs that the white fox had never heard before, the white fox was secretly surprised at her little brother's musical talent. Unbeknownst to them, in the world that Yu Qianqiu lived in, the prosperity of music was not something that this world could compare to. The efficiency of the dissemination of music was something that people in this world did not even dare to think about. Yu Qianqiu had listened to it many times, so he had a clear mind. Furthermore, he had learned to play the zither from a good teacher, so he was naturally able to play it with ease. Every time a new song was played, White Fox's eyes would flash with amazement. Guan Yu and Chen Feng, who were busy in the flower bed, looked at each other. Previously, the two of them were already deeply shocked by Yu Qianqiu's profound knowledge in zoology and botany. They didn't expect their boss to be so talented in music as well. The two of them had also heard the two songs that the White Fox had played over and over again, and they already felt that it was unprecedentedly beautiful. However, after Yu Qianqiu added the dubbing and music from the two songs that he remembered from his previous life, the two of them were intoxicated, and White Fox was dumbfounded. The two of them said something that they did not dare to say in front of the White Fox, and that was that their boss was indeed their boss. After learning their master's zither skills, he immediately surpassed their master, and played much better than Miss White. There was one time when Yu Qianqiu changed more than 10 songs in more than 2 hours. The style of the songs was not the slightest bit different, but the songs were still very moving. After he left, the White Fox stood in the sea of flowers with a pale face, and stared in the direction of the bamboo house. She stood there for an entire night, carefully recalling every song. After recalling, her mouth was full of bitterness. She had played the zither for hundreds of years, and she thought that few people could compare with her attainments in zither music. However, she did not expect that she could not compare with her brother, who had only practiced the zither for a year. Who would believe it if she said it? But she believed that Yu Qianqiu, who had taught her step by step, naturally knew that her brother really knew nothing about playing the zither before. Although his zither skills were a little worse, who could compare with his musical sense and attainments in zither music? Yu Qianqiu, who was holding the zither to vent his emotions in the bamboo pavilion, had no idea that he had shocked the three of them during this time. After the song, he also disappeared. He staggered back to the mulberry garden. At the door of the utility room, Farong was waiting for him with a shoulder pole and a dung ladle, guarding 2 buckets of dung, and he was already used to it. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled in surprise. What had he done in the past year? He could not steal the spirit herbs, nor could he get the seeds. He could not even get his sister in the mulberry garden, let alone the plan to get the seeds from Yan Zixia. She had never seen her before. He often carried out the spirit of AQ and comforted himself. It's not that I'm incompetent. It's just that the people in the cultivation world are too abnormal. If the things were in the hands of ordinary people, I would have gotten them long ago. Although he said so, in fact he was quite shocked. He had doubts about the ability of his former and current boss. Martial Uncle Farong, I made you wait for a long time again. Yu Qianqiu took the shoulder pole with a smile, hung the buckets on it, put it on his shoulder, and walked out of the courtyard. Farong said, "No." She followed him with 2 dung ladles, one long and one short. The short one was made by Farong herself, saying that it was convenient to fertilize. These two were the most unconventional combination of the mulberry garden. They went to the dung pit outside the wall one after the other, filled it with fertilizer, and carried the pole back. There were more than a dozen spirit herb fields in the mulberry garden. Fertilizing the roots of each spirit herb needed to be watered a little, no more no less. After all, spirit herbs were not cabbages, so it was a test of experience. A spirit herb field needed about a bucket of fertilizer. Yu Qianqiu had to carry it several times every day, and he basically spent half a day here. Qingqiao, I heard that the foundation building pills will be issued in 10 days. Yes, Senior Marshal Sister Lulu, I'm so nervous. I'm really afraid that I won't be able to successfully build my foundation. Don't worry. People like us, who are selected to join the mulberry garden, have good aptitudes in Wanfen Garden. We'll definitely succeed in building our foundation on the first try. They were going to issue the foundation building pills? Yu Qianqiu immediately stopped what he was doing, turned his head to look at the 2 young girls who were pulling weeds in the neighboring field, and pricked up his ears to listen. That's true. The disciples selected to join the mulberry garden are all top-notch in Wanfen Garden. I don't think I've heard of any seniors in the garden who have succeeded in building their foundation more than twice. And if we really can't succeed, we'll just wait for another 3 years. We have 3 chances, so there won't be any problems. After the 2 young girls comforted each other, they laughed and changed the topic. and began to talk about who was the most beautiful. Yu Qianqiu was startled. His heart was beating fast from their words, but they didn't say anything. He couldn't help but curse in his heart. Damn it! It's none of your business whether other people are beautiful or not. Why are all women like this? After patiently tending to a field, he couldn't hold back anymore. He put down the things in his hands, and with a face full of smiles, he walked towards the spirit herb field next door. Ah, so it's the two beautiful senior Marshall sisters, Qingqiao and Lulu. Yu Qianqiu laughed coquettishly. The two girls, who were squatting and pulling grass, heard him and looked over. When they saw Yu Qianqiu walking over, they both stood up. It seemed like they were familiar with him. Yu Qianqiu, don't come any closer. Qingqiao frowned, and her tone was very unfriendly. No hurry, hee hee. Yu Qianqiu laughed and said, I just want to ask these two senior Marshall sisters a few questions. After I'm done, I'll leave immediately. Seeing him continue to walk over, the two girls pinched their noses and took a step back. Lulu shouted, Yu Qianqiu, if you come any closer, we won't be polite anymore. Yu Qianqiu raised his arm and sniffed his sleeve, and said sincerely, I put medicine on it, so it really doesn't stink at all. If you don't believe me, you can smell it. As he said that, he extended his arm towards the two girls. Senior Marshall's sister, let's go. Don't mind him. Qingqiao pulled Lulu and said, and the latter nodded. Just like that, the two girls left with a look of deep hatred. F*ck. Yu Qianqiu sniffed his body again, and after confirming that there was no smell, he said indignantly, Didn't the things I picked out by the two of you? Why are you hiding? Damn it! If you're so capable, come and poop. Chapter 63. After encountering too many annoying things, scolding would naturally dissipate, and he wouldn't take it to heart. But the foundation building pill was a big deal for him. After staying in the mulberry garden for so long, he actually didn't know that the foundation building pill was going to be distributed. Looking at Furong, who was attentively fertilizing the spiritual herbs, he really couldn't feel happy. Marshall Aunt Furong, isn't the foundation building pill distributed once every 3 years? Yu Qianqiu asked expressionlessly. Furong held a short manure ladle, thought for a moment, then nodded and said, This year seems to be the 3rd year. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Asking her was also a waste of time. Her world seemed to have no other things. It was too pure and simple. But thinking about it, what Qingqiao and Lulu said should be true. Would he have a chance to build his foundation soon? Would he be able to build his foundation successfully? Regardless of whether he could succeed or not, having a chance was better than not having a chance. Unfortunately, there was only one foundation building pill each time. Xiaotian, Guanyu Chenfeng, I'm sorry. Don't worry, this boss will definitely do what he promised you. Thinking of this, Yu Qianqiu's depression, that had accumulated for more than a year, was swept away. He faintly became excited, and his work speed was clearly a lot faster. He urgently wanted to find someone to ask when the foundation building pill would be distributed. After finishing his work, he threw the things to Furong to deal with. He wandered around the mulberry garden, wanting to get close to people and ask about them when he saw them. But the attitude of the people here was similar to Qingqiao and Lulu. He had no choice but to leave the mulberry garden. In the end, he, the only man who carried manure in Wanfen Garden, was too famous. No matter who he found, they were afraid of him, and he was almost beaten by beautiful women several times. Yu Qianqiu, don't you know that disciples who haven't reached the foundation building stage are not allowed to wander around the garden? A middle-aged woman at the entrance of Wanfen Garden stopped him. Martial ancestor, I was originally a disciple on loan from the Alchemy Pavilion. I have to go back to the Alchemy Pavilion to do something. It won't be long before I return. Yu Qianqiu saw that he really couldn't ask anything in Wanfen Garden, so he wanted to go back to the Alchemy Pavilion to ask Ling Feng and the others. No, the lady refused without hesitation. Grandmaster, then do you know when the foundation building dawn for us Qi condensation disciples will be distributed? I don't know. Yu Qianqiu, don't come any closer. Go back, or else don't blame me for being rude. The middle-aged woman pulled out the sword in her hand and shouted at Yu Qianqiu with a disgusted expression. His face twitched, and he showed signs of anger, but when he saw the shining longsword in front of him, he knew that a wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him. He could only grit his teeth and retreat. Unable to ask about the foundation-building pill, he ran into a wall everywhere and suffered a bellyful of anger. Yu Qianqiu went to the riverside alone and decided to fish to relieve his boredom. He took out the fishing gear he made from under a rock. But strangely, it seemed that his bad mood also affected the mood of the fish in the river. Not a single fish took the bait. As a result, the more he fished, the angrier he became. He retracted the fishing rod and threw it back. Hibiscus said that this river leads to the sea. Since there are people guarding Wanfen Garden, there shouldn't be anyone stopping me from going to the seaside, right? Yu Qianqiu muttered as he looked at the river that stretched between the mountains. Unknowingly, he followed the direction of the river. After walking along the weeds by the river for more than 2 hours, the river in front of him passed through 2 dark, barren mountains. He could already smell the salty smell in the air. Yu Qianqiu thought to himself, "I'm afraid I'm already at the mouth of the sea." Sure enough, when he reached the mountains, he could already hear the sound of waves beating against the shore, mixed with the cries of seabirds. He quickened his pace and passed through the mountains. His eyes suddenly opened up. The river rushed to its end, the sea. The blue sea was surging, and the white sandy beach was smooth and clean as the waves rose and fell. A flock of seagulls flew between the sea and the sky, and the 2 barren mountains behind him seemed to be where they built their nests. He hadn't seen the sea for a long time. The endless sea was so wide. The scenery in front of him made Yu Qianqiu feel refreshed, and all his troubles were forgotten. Ayo! Ayo! Yu Qianqiu took off his shoes and socks and rushed forward barefooted, leaving a row of footprints on the flat beach. His cries immediately startled a flock of seagulls on the rocks behind him, and they also echoed his cries. Yu Qianqiu waved his fists at them flying in the air and laughed loudly. However, he didn't notice that a person walked out of a cliff cave behind him and was staring at him. It was none other than Yin Zixia, whom he hadn't seen for more than a year. Like a child, Yu Qianqiu, who was happily playing at the seaside, only stopped after a long time. He stared at the vast sea and opened his arms, as if he wanted to embrace the entire sea. Suddenly he shouted, this scene, should be sung to express our will." With a somersault, he somersaulted out of the seawater and landed on the clean beach, sitting cross-legged. With a wave of his hand, he placed a 7-string zither on his knees. Yu Qianqiu brewed a little, and immediately, he let out an unrestrained laugh. A familiar melody sung by Ren Xianqi from his previous life appeared in his mind, just in line with the current situation and mood. Yin Zixia, who was on the cliff cave, stared at the person below and murmured, "It's Yu Qianqiu. Is he going to sing? I've seen the secret report from 100 Flowers Palace that the world-famous white fox and dream of mandarin ducks and butterflies were actually created by an unranked disciple of Ong Kuang-sung. That person seems to be called Yu Qianqiu. I've admired him for a long time, but it's a pity that I can't meet him. I wonder if this Yu Qianqiu is the same Yu Qianqiu. I'll wait and see." After laughing, Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and waved. His fingers made a sound on the zither. His mood was surging, and he unconsciously used his true qi. The sound of the zither pierced through the sound of crashing waves and spread in all directions. His 10 fingers had already skillfully plucked the strings of the zither. Dong, dong, dong. The moving prelude gradually sounded. Hearing this prelude, Yin Zixia's eyes were already a little brighter. Suddenly, Yu Qianqiu burst into another wave of laughter. Accompanied by the sound of the zither, he opened his mouth and sang loudly towards the boundless sea. The blue sea laughs, the surging tides on both sides, floating and sinking with the waves, remembering the present. The heavens laughs, one after another. The heavens know who wins and who loses. The rivers and mountains laugh, the distant misty rain. The waves wash away the mortal world. How many do you know in the secular world? The cool breeze laughs, actually provoking loneliness. The lofty sentiments still remain in the evening. La 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 la. The wild voice in the hoarse voice, the wild singing, the lofty sentiments in the song, and the laughter of the common people. Facing the sea, laughing at the world, laughing at the common people, laughing at the sea, laughing at the world, laughing at the common people. Everything was in this song. This kind of lofty and unrestrained song was completely different from White Fox and Dream of Mandarin Ducks and Butterflies. When Yan Zixia heard it, even as a woman, her whole body trembled. Was the person in front of her, that ordinary-looking little disciple of the alchemy pavilion, that she had seen before? The scene of seeing Yu Qianqiu for the first time emerged in her mind. A trace of a smile appeared at the corner of Yan Zixia's mouth. 100 Flowers Palace's secret report said that Yu Qianqiu doesn't care about fame and fortune, and is willing to hide with the reputation of being a waste. The example in the report is very similar to this Yu Qianqiu in front of me. With such talent, he is actually willing to carry manure and fertilize the mulberry garden day after day. He really is a person with shocking talent, who has seen through the affairs of the world. If this Yu Qianqiu isn't that Yu Qianqiu, who else can it be? Is there a second Yu Qianqiu with such talent in the world? I don't believe it. If Yu Qianqiu heard her words, he would definitely hug her thigh and cry bitterly. He would definitely tell her, I really don't want to carry manure in the mulberry garden. I really don't have a choice. Big sister, please save me. Chapter 64. His 10 fingers skillfully pressed, plucked, swept, plucked and strummed the 7 strings. The sound of the guqin was sometimes impassioned and sometimes more intense. Accompanied by his la-la-la harmonies, it could make one forget all the unhappiness and troubles in one's heart. At this moment, one did not need to be troubled. One only needed to be influenced by him and laugh while facing the sea with him. Even the sea seemed to be influenced by his song and the sound of the guqin. The waves were sometimes turbulent and sometimes calm. The seagulls flying above the sea also increasingly ignored the turbulence of the sea and dared to pass through the surging waves. Yan Zixia's eyes were a little dazed and intoxicated. Suddenly the sound of the guqin changed. Yu Qianqiu sang again. The sea laughs, the surging tides on both sides, floating and sinking with the waves, remembering today. The heavens laughs, one after another. Who wins and who loses, the heavens know. The rivers and mountains laugh. The misty rain is far away. The waves wash away the mortal world. How many do you know? The common people laugh, no longer lonely, the lofty sentiments are still there, laughing foolishly la 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 la. Yu Qianqiu repeated the song over and over again. His 10 fingers waved freely, as if he wanted to vent all the unhappiness of the past year. Fortunately, the white fox was not here. If she knew that she had missed out on such a good song by her brother, she would definitely regret it. The eyes on the cliff stared at the back of the free and unrestrained lofty sentiments, becoming more and more blurred. A strand of longing in her heart, which had been sealed for many years, finally saw the light of day today. It was hooked by the song and wrapped around the back of the figure. It was tightly tied and could not be untied. Many years later, this back was something she could not forget. Yu Qianqiu's unintentional action was really fate. I wonder what the name of this song is. Yan Zixia savored the meaning of the lyrics and murmured, the ocean laughs, the heavens laughs, the rivers and mountains laugh, the breeze laughs, and the common people laugh. You have so many funny things, but who will laugh with me? Floating and sinking with the waves, only remembering today? I remember the present, but can you remember the me of the present? The misty rain is far away. The waves wash away the mortal world. How many do you know? What do you remember? Can you tell me? How dare you provoke loneliness? Who made you miss? Not me. No longer lonely. Do you have someone in your heart? Not me. The lofty sentiments are still there, smiling foolishly? You're quite optimistic, but I'm afraid I can't. She was talking to herself, but she did not know that just a step behind her, Ma Jugu, who was leaning on her walking stick, was listening with a smile on her face. She was looking at her kindly, and from time to time, she would look at the carefree Yu Qianqiu. Ma Jugu was also attracted by Yu Qianqiu's zither music and singing. Who told Yu Qianqiu to forget himself for a moment? The more he played, the more excited he became. His zhenqi surged all over his body as he played and sang, and his voice traveled far. Then again, Ma Jugu had to admit that after living for hundreds of years, this was the first time she had heard such a wonderful song. She also had to admit that she had misjudged Yu Qianqiu the first time she saw him. She didn't expect that there was such a great peerless talent hiding in her mulberry garden. What a surprise! It's a pity that such a gifted scholar has to carry feces. But he's a good fit for my Xia, to be her husband. Thinking of this, Ma Jugu thought to herself, Xia don't you want to know the name of that song? Granny will help you figure it out. You don't have to worry that he won't remember you today. Great-grandmother will let him remember you today. Although she was old, she lifted the walking stick in her hand and fiercely poked it on the rock. She shouted in a loud voice, "Which child is it that doesn't know death and is making a ruckus here? Aren't you afraid that I will take your life?" As expected of a consecrator of the supporting immortal island, his cultivation was indeed profound. With just a casual shout, the sound it emitted was able to suppress the sound of the waves and Yu Qianqiu's playing. Yan Zixia was shocked and quickly turned around. When she saw her great-grandmother's angry expression, she couldn't help but turn pale in fright. She thought to herself, when did great-grandmother come? Did she hear what I said just now? Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Why was there someone else here? The sound of the zither came to an abrupt stop. He quickly stored it into his storage pouch and leaped up. He finally noticed the two people on the cliff behind him. Ah, isn't that Ma Jiugu and Yan Zixia? Why are they here? It's over. That old woman seems to be very angry. What should I do? Not many people can withstand the wrath of an old monster like her. Damn it. I'm afraid of birds. If worse comes to worst, I'll leave. It's just a pity for the Foundation establishment pill. But my life is still more important. A series of thoughts flashed in his mind. After analyzing the situation, Yu Qianqiu respectfully bowed and said, Disciple Yu Qianqiu greets Consecrator Jugu. Disciple was presumptuous and didn't know that Consecrator Jugu was here. Otherwise, Disciple would never dare to disturb Consecrator Jugu. When Yan Zixia heard this, a thought flashed in her mind. Fortunately, you didn't know. Otherwise, would you still come here and sing? Humph. Ma Jugu snorted with a frosty expression. Her voice echoed on the beach and the cliff for a long time. Yu Qianqiu secretly thought that she was very powerful. He quickly bowed and said, Please forgive me, Consecrator Jugu. Disciple knows his mistake. I'll go back now. I won't dare to disturb you again. After saying that, he quickly ran to pick up his shoes and socks and put them on before running away. A trace of disappointment flashed in Yan Zixia's eyes, but it was all seen by Ma Jugu. She thought to herself, Xia really likes him. Did I say you can go? Ma Jugu pointed her walking stick and shouted coldly. Yu Qianqiu, who had just run a few steps, suddenly stopped and didn't dare to run anymore. He knew that it was better to be obedient now. If he angered her, even if he escaped back to the Golden Pearl, he would never be able to return to supporting Immortal Island. He would also never be able to obtain the Foundation establishment pill again. He could only obediently come back and salute. Disciple obeys Consecrator Jugu's instructions. Ma Jugu poked the ground with her walking stick and said coldly, I don't like to talk to people from so far away. Come up. I have something to ask you. Yes. A trace of joy flashed in Yan Zixia's eyes. Ma Jugu saw it, but pretended not to see it. Hey, old woman. Don't you know how to come down? It's so high that I'll have to climb up. Yu Qianqiu didn't dare to say it out loud. He looked at the nearly 10-meter-high cliff cave and obediently climbed up. Although his cultivation wasn't high, climbing a mountain was a piece of cake. As soon as Yu Qianqiu reached the cave entrance, he felt a wave of heat coming at him. He didn't think too much and immediately saluted. Consecrator Jugu, Martial Uncle Yan. Yan Zixia nodded and smiled at him. Ma Jugu poked the ground with her walking stick and turned around, saying, Come with me. Yu Qianqiu didn't know what she was going to do, so he vigilantly looked around. No wonder the two suddenly appeared on the cliff. It turned out to be a cave. He didn't know where it led to, so he had no choice but to follow them inside. The cave walls were inlaid with fluorescent stones to illuminate the path downward. Yu Qianqiu could feel the three of them heading downward. Not long after, he saw a red light flashing at a bend in the cave wall ahead. and the temperature was getting higher. Just as he was wondering where the two of them were taking him, a wave of heat came rushing at him as soon as he turned the corner. What he saw in front of him shocked him. The three of them were on a stone bridge that wasn't very wide. Deep under the bridge, a red liquid was surging like boiling water, and red bubbles were popping up and popping. Yu Qianqiu exclaimed, "Volcanic magma." Chapter 65. Huh. Ma Jiugu, who was walking in front, stopped and turned around. Most people call it fire dragon, but very few people know that it's called volcano lava. It seems that you're quite knowledgeable. You actually know what it is? Yan Zixia gave him a meaningful look. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. It's nothing. I've only heard about it before. Ma Jiugu grunted and continued walking forward. This was his first time walking on a volcano's lava. He felt like he had seen it in a movie. Suddenly, he recalled that the color of the rocks on the peak of Alchemy Pavilion was the same as the rocks outside. Moreover, the temperature on the mountain was very high. Needless to say, Alchemy Pavilion was definitely built on top of a volcano. If his guess was correct, this so-called supporting immortal island was probably just a volcanic island. When he thought of this, he jumped in fright. Oh my God! Volcanoes were no laughing matter. There was no scientific warning system in this era. If one were to erupt, everyone would be finished. Looking at the lava below, it was still relatively calm. Clearly, there wasn't any explosive energy. However, this thing was really hard to explain. It seemed that after successfully building his foundation, he would have to leave as soon as possible. He didn't want to be poked into the sky by a volcano one day. At the end of the stone bridge was a large stone room. From the chisel marks around it, it was obvious that it had been excavated by humans. In the middle of the room was a large pit that sunk into the ground. At the eye of the pit was a large copper furnace that was roughly as tall as a person. Smoke was rising from the top of the furnace, and he could smell the fragrance of medicinal pills. A faint flame was emitted from the bottom of the furnace, illuminating the ground red. Immediately, a thought emerged in Yu Qianqiu's mind. This was alchemy. Using the volcano's earthly fire to refine pills was a good idea. Not only was the fire huge, but there was also no need to use firewood. It was no wonder that Alchemy Pavilion was built on top of a volcano. According to the records on the Jade Archive, the three true flames were the first to be used in alchemy. However, this was only a legend. Next was the natal true flames. Only those with extremely high cultivations possessed them. However, using them to refine pills consumed a lot of vitality. Next was the heavenly flames. He didn't know what a heavenly flame was, but he knew that earthly fire referred to a volcano's fire. Lastly was the ordinary firewood. Why did Ma Jiugu bring me here? Yu Qianqiu couldn't figure it out. The three of them walked down the stairs to the bottom of the pit. Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt a little unbearable. The temperature was too high. Even with his cultivation, it seemed like he couldn't handle it. To be exact, it was a little scalding. After a while, seeing that Ma Jiugu still didn't say anything, he had the urge to run away. If he stayed any longer, he would be roasted into human jerky. We still lack an assistant. Are you willing to come? Ma Jiugu, who was standing in front of the furnace, finally spoke. Yu Qianqiu seemed to be in a daze from the roasting, and felt a little drowsy. His ears were ringing, and he couldn't hear what she said at all. Ma Jiugu was startled. She turned around and saw his situation. She immediately shouted, "Why aren't you circulating your cultivation to resist? Do you want to die with your cultivation?" Yan Zixia was thinking about the meaning of her great-grandmother's words. She turned around and also saw that his situation was not good. She showed a trace of anxiety. Shocked by Ma Jiugu's shout, Yu Qianqiu woke up. He circulated his junqi and did his best to disperse the heat in his body. His somewhat sluggish and red eyes became lively again, but he still felt hot. He thought to himself, this is more enjoyable than a sauna. Seeing that he was awake, Ma Jiugu repeated her words. We still lack an assistant. Are you willing to come? Ah, I'm willing. Of course I'm willing. This was his dream. How could he not be willing? At least it was better than carrying dung all day long. After a moment of joy he frowned and said, I'm afraid that Elder Fei won't agree. You don't have to worry about Ferdinand. Ma Jugu looked at the furnace that was getting more and more fragrant and said, "This furnace is done." She tapped the top of the furnace with her walking stick, and the lid popped open. A rich fragrance spread in all directions. Dozens of black shadows came out of the furnace. Ma Jugu gently waved her sleeve and absorbed the black shadows. She then put them into the storage pouch on her waist. His crutch tapped the ground again, producing a metallic sound. The bottom of the pill furnace darkened, and in an instant, there was no more flame. Yu Qianqiu could feel the temperature slowly dropping. He couldn't help but feel surprised. There must be some kind of mechanism installed below. It was really a good place for alchemy. Ma Jugu turned around and said to Yan Zixia, "He will be your assistant in the future." Then she staggered up the stairs. Yan Zixia was stunned and blushed. She understood that her great-grandmother might have heard her words and wanted to help her. She stole a glance at Yu Qianqiu. The latter looked at Ma Jugu and sighed inwardly. If he didn't know better, he wouldn't know that this person who couldn't even walk steadily was actually a late-stage tribulation-passing cultivator. Suddenly, Ma Jugu turned around and asked, "Boy, I want to ask you something. What's the name of the song you were shouting outside?" Yu Qianqiu scratched his head in embarrassment and said, "I just sang it casually. Let's call it Ocean's Laugh." "Oh." Ma Jugu turned around and shook her head. "Laugh, laugh. I'm old and can't laugh anymore. I'll leave it to you young people. Alas, it's good to be young." After watching the old woman leave, Yu Qianqiu nodded and bowed to Yan Zixia. "Martial Aunt Yan." Yan Zixia chuckled at his flattering appearance and thought that this person's acting was quite good. He was already exposed, so why was he still pretending? She rolled her eyes and asked, "Yu Qianqiu, I have a question for you. Do you know him?" Yu Qianqiu was puzzled, but he still replied respectfully, "Martial Aunt, please ask. Yu Qianqiu will tell you everything he knows." "That's good." Yan Zixia walked gracefully and said slowly, "In recent years, 2 songs have been sung in the cultivation world. One is called White Fox, and the other is called Mandarin Duck and Butterfly Dream. I heard that they were composed by a disciple of Ong Sung. That person's name seems to be Yu Qianqiu. Do you know him?" Yu Qianqiu's expression changed, but he immediately returned to normal. He couldn't let anyone else know about this matter. Otherwise, Fuxian Island would treat him as a spy sent by Ong Sung, which was one of the biggest taboos in the cultivation world. He shook his head without hesitation and said, "I don't know him, and I've never heard of those 2 songs. I didn't expect that there would be someone with the same name as me. I guess Martial Aunt must have seen him before. What does he look like?" "Of course I have." Yan Zixia stared at him with a playful smile and said, "Not only have I seen him, but I've also talked to him. I've also heard him play the guqin and sing at the seaside. The strangest thing is that he looks exactly like you." Yu Qianqiu's heart was beating wildly. Her words were too obvious. She was obviously talking about him, but he had never seen her when he was in Ong Sung. It was very likely that she was lying to him. He said in surprise, "Ah, there is actually someone in this world who looks so much like me. Not only do we have the same name, but we also look exactly the same. Martial Aunt, if there is a chance, you must take me to see him. He may be my relative." Yan Zixia was stunned. She almost said that he was Ong Sung's Yu Qianqiu. She didn't expect that she had made it so obvious. But he still pretended that he didn't know. He was really thick-skinned. After thinking for a while, she understood. His disciple was not expelled from the sect, and he secretly joined another sect. Anyone would treat him as a spy. This was a taboo in the cultivation world. He would lose his life. She asked too rashly. Yan Zixia didn't say anything more. She said, "If you don't know him, then forget it. Let's go back to the mulberry garden." Chapter 66. Both of them had their own thoughts, and were silent along the way. Yu Qianqiu thought about it carefully, and was basically sure that she already knew about him. He didn't know why the grandmother and granddaughter brought him to their side. He thought about all kinds of possibilities and had a headache. But he didn't expect Yan Zixia to fall in love with him. This man was sometimes like this. He was too clever, and couldn't see the essence of things. Maybe the person involved was confused. After saying those words, Yan Zixia regretted it to death. From Yu Qianqiu's careful and respectful tone, she could tell that he had already become estranged from her. It was as if he was constantly on guard against her, as if she would harm him. She wanted to explain, but she was afraid that the more she explained, the deeper the misunderstanding would be. She could only slowly taste the bitterness in her mouth. Yu Qianqiu finally knew why he didn't see Yan Zixia come out for more than a year. It turned out that she never went in and out of the mulberry garden's front door. As she entered the courtyard, they came to the most mysterious house in the mulberry garden. Looking at the furnishings in the house carefully, he couldn't see anything special. The whole house was made of wood and felt very ordinary. At most, the wood used to build the house was old trees. But there was a smell that couldn't be described. In other words, it was spiritual energy. Ma Jugu had returned long ago. She was lying on a rocking chair and chatting with Elder Lan next to her. Elder Lan was truly a beautiful and dignified young married woman. Her figure was truly indescribable. She was voluptuous, with a protruding front and a curvaceous back. Her skin was so delicate and white that it could be pinched with a pinch of water. Her face and temperament were also indescribable. In Yu Qianqiu's words, she was the best among young married women. Especially her body was always covered with a layer of light, which made people feel that she was a fairy. Such a beauty, but unfortunately, she was Ferdinand's wife. Elder Lan turned her head and glanced at the two of them with a smile. She was slightly stunned. It seemed that she didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to come with Yan Zixia. She was a little surprised and said, "Xia Yu." Her eyes fell on Yu Qianqiu. Ma Jugu, who was sitting on the rocking chair, said, "Last Lan, leave Yu Qianqiu to Xia, or to assist him. There's no need for him to take care of the spiritual plants. Go and tell Ferdinand." "Jugu, it's fine as long as you agree. What else do you need to tell him?" Elder Lan said. "Lan girl, Wan Fenyuan belongs to Ferdinand. The rules can't be ignored." "I know." Elder Lan stood up and glanced at the two of them. He was startled to see Yan Zixia's blushing face. Then, he realized something and looked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile. "Yu Qianqiu, you can move into the inner courtyard from now on. It's more convenient this way." As he spoke, he glanced at Yan Zixia, who was avoiding his gaze. "Move in." An image of a disfigured face and a frail figure flashed through Yu Qianqiu's mind, and his heart clenched for no reason. He didn't understand the grandmother and granddaughter's intention. He felt that moving in might not be a good thing. He immediately refused. "Elder Lan, I'm used to living with Uncle Furong. You don't need to trouble yourself. I'll live there." The three women all stared at him at the same time. "Furong." Elder Lan's face sank. She said coldly, "What? You don't listen to me because of that ugly monster?" A wave of cold air that was visible to the naked eye assaulted Yu Qianqiu, forcing him to take a step back. He immediately felt a bone-chilling cold all over his body, causing him to shiver. "Lan girl. Aunt Lan." Yan Zixia stood in front of Elder Lan. She couldn't help but shiver when she touched the white cold air. She said after the cold air went back, "Aunt Lan, forget it. Don't force him. It's the same whether he lives outside or inside." Elder Lan coldly snorted and turned her body to the side. She gave face to the grandmother and granddaughter. Seeing the awkward situation, Yan Zixia said to Yu Qianqiu, "You go back first. I'll find you if there's anything." Yu Qianqiu nodded and bowed to the three. When he walked past the well at the entrance of the courtyard, he couldn't help but shiver. He found that the cold air from the well was similar to Elder Lan's. He couldn't help but shake his head with a bitter smile. It wasn't worth it to offend an expert just because of a disagreement. After returning and seeing Furong, Yu Qianqiu had something he couldn't figure out. It wasn't just about today's matter. This Elder Lan was all smiles to everyone in the mulberry garden, except for Furong. As long as she saw Furong, her pretty face would immediately freeze. Furong also seemed to be very afraid of her. It was like a cat and a mouse. He told Furong about his transfer. There wasn't any surprise on her face. It was as if everything that happened to him was expected. Early in the morning, Yu Qianqiu still had to carry a pole and work. Furong said that since he had been transferred, he didn't need to do it anymore. Unfortunately, she couldn't change his mind. But he didn't have time to do the work of fertilizing. Yan Zixia came to find him. He looked at their living environment and saw that there was only a tattered curtain between their beds. He couldn't help but frown. After seeing Furong's appearance, he was silent for a while and didn't say anything. After working for Yan Zixia for a few days, he found that there was nothing to do. She didn't need his help at all. He was just accompanying her. He finally understood that Yan Zixia came to the volcano cave every day to learn alchemy. However, he also benefited from it. He had learned most of Yan Zixia's craftsmanship. The only thing he needed was some time to practice. If there was anything he didn't understand, as long as he asked, Yan Zixia would be happy to answer him. This was exactly what he dreamed of. He was happy to follow her every day. There was nothing to be unhappy about. Today, Mulberry Garden sent out a notice. All aura refining disciples were to gather in the inner garden. The foundation building pills were distributed to everyone. Yu Qianqiu happily ran to the inner garden. He stood in a row with 7 beautiful aura refining beauties. The 8 of them couldn't hide their excitement. Opposite them, Yan Zixia and Ma Jiugu stood under the eaves with the help of a walking stick. Both of them looked at Yu Qianqiu and smiled. Yu Qianqiu smiled happily. He had been looking forward to this day for several years. How could he not be happy? Elder Lan smiled amiably and said, "Today is a good day. Everyone, don't be excited. Wait a moment, the foundation building pills will be delivered soon." The 8 of them bowed together and said, "Thank you for the sect's help. Thank you, consecrated Jiugu. Thank you, Elder Lan. If our cultivation is successful in the future, we will definitely work hard for the sect." These were some old words. Everyone had memorized them before they came. But at this time their gratitude was real, including Yu Qianqiu. In short, everyone laughed very happily. Everyone was very happy. Looking at this scene, Yu Qianqiu sighed. A big sect was really a big sect. How many disciples in Fuxian Island had not reached the foundation building stage? It was definitely not a small number. The number of foundation building pills they took out at once was not a small number. Back in the day, even a large sect like the Azure Light School would only be able to obtain a limited amount of foundation establishment, Dawn, through the New Excellence Assembly that was held once every 10 years. Moreover, not all of the disciples in the school had the opportunity to obtain one, and some disciples would not even have the luck to obtain one until they were old. How could it be like the supporting Immortal Island? It had its own spiritual herb garden and could refine pills. Furthermore, every 3 years, the entire island would be able to refine pills. This was strength. Sure enough, not long after, someone delivered the foundation building pills. Fei Dinan came with a box personally with a smile. The 8 of them bowed together and said, "Greetings, Elder Fei." Fei Dinan walked to Elder Lan's side and waved. He said happily, "Today is a good day for everyone. No need to be so polite." He glanced at everyone with a smile. His gaze paused on Yu Qianqiu, and the latter smiled at him respectfully. Fei Dinan was startled. He looked at Yu Qianqiu, and then looked at the box in his hand. He could not smile anymore. Elder Lan, who was beside him, grabbed the box in his hand and rolled her eyes at him. She said coquettishly, "Why are you in a daze? The disciples have been waiting anxiously." Chapter 67. The 8 of them stared at the slowly opening wooden box in Elder Lan's hand, and immediately smelled a fragrance. Their eyes couldn't help but show a look of anticipation. Elder Lan stretched out 2 slender fingers, and smiled as she took out a foundation-building pill the size of a purple quail. She placed it under her nose and sniffed it. She looked at the crowd and said with a smile, "It smells so good." Everyone laughed along with him. Elder Lan put the foundation-building pill back into the box. Just as she was about to look up, she suddenly paused and looked into the box in disbelief. Then, she glanced at the 8 people standing opposite her with a look of confirmation. "Ferdinand, what's going on? Why are there only 7? Where's the last one? Did you eat it?" Elder Lan asked her husband unhappily as she held the box in her hands. For a moment, everyone who was in high spirits just now quietened down. Especially the 8 disciples. They were even more anxious. What did one less mean? It meant that someone might not get it. When he saw Ferdinand's eyes looking at him, Yu Qianqiu's heart was beating fast. He thought to himself, "Oh no, that missing one isn't for me, right?" He was not the only one who was nervous. The other 7 female disciples were also very nervous. That, indeed, I miss one person to the sect. Ferdinand smiled and pointed to someone and said, "I forgot about Yu Qianqiu." "What?" Yu Qianqiu cried out in surprise, and he instantly felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. His head buzzed, and his countenance instantly turned ghastly pale. He shook his head with great effort to stabilize himself. Elder Lan's face immediately turned cold. She said in a cold tone, "Ferdinand, what do you mean? You got the person from the elixir refining pavilion. What? You threw him to the mulberry garden and left him alone? Could it be that you looked down on our mulberry garden so much?" The other 7 female disciples heaved a sigh of relief and looked at Yu Qianqiu with pity in their eyes. "Long girl, don't be anxious. Let Ferdinand explain clearly what's going on." Yin Zixia walked over while supporting Ma Jiugu. The former saw that Yu Qianqiu's face did not look good and could not help but show a trace of worry on her face. Am I being wronged? He had personally delivered the medicine, which meant that he looked down on the mulberry garden. However, that brat was borrowed from the alchemy pavilion and is not considered a true disciple of my myriad fragrance garden. I forgot to report him. Right, the alchemy pavilion. Thinking up to here, Ferdinand suddenly came to a realization. He bowed to Ma Jiugu and said, "Jiugu, Bingxue indeed misunderstood me. Think about it. Yu Qianqiu is actually a disciple of the alchemy pavilion. How can I report him under the name of Wanfen Garden? Don't worry. The alchemy pavilion definitely has him. Even if they don't, they can only blame themselves. Just let them refine another batch." "I see, Danan is right." Ma Jiugu nodded and said to Yu Qianqiu, "You don't have to worry. You will get what belongs to you." Yu Qianqiu also heaved a sigh of relief, but he still felt a little uneasy before he confirmed what he had obtained. He squeezed out a smile and said, "With you in charge, disciple is not in a hurry." "Bingxue, you see, you misunderstood me," Ferdinand said in a wrong tone. Lan Bingxue rolled her eyes at him and sneered. "Who told you not to make it clear?" After that, she held the box in her hand and distributed the fragrant building foundation pills to everyone. The disciples who received the pills were very excited and said, "Elder Xielan." Only Yu Qianqiu looked at her with a pitiful expression. Ma Jiugu couldn't stand it anymore. No matter how high her cultivation was, she was still from the qi refining stage. She could understand Yu Qianqiu's mood. Not to mention that he was the husband she had decided for Xiaer. After the pills were distributed, she said to Ferdinand, "Danan, take Yu Qianqiu to the alchemy pavilion now. The sooner things are settled, the better." "Yes," Ferdinand responded and said to Yu Qianqiu with a smile, "Let's go find your master to settle the account." He grabbed him and flew away. Before Yu Qianqiu could react, in just a few breaths' time, the 2 of them had already arrived in front of the alchemy pavilion's main hall. Ferdinand shouted towards the inside, "Guan Weiwu, get out here." Scaring the disciples who were about to come over to salute, they took a detour. "Old Fei, did you eat arsenic? Why is your voice so loud?" Guan Weiwu came out with wide eyes. Ferdinand smiled and said, "Look who I brought for you. Master." Yu Qianqiu saluted with infinite sorrow. "Yu Qianqiu." Guan Weiwu was a little surprised and looked at Ferdinand. "You are willing to return my disciple to me?" "Pft! Return what? I came to ask you for building foundation pills." "Get lost." The refined building foundation pills were all given to the sect. "Where would I get building foundation pills for you?" Guan Weiwu's voice was not small. "Yu Qianqiu is your disciple, and also a disciple of your alchemy pavilion. If you don't give him building foundation pills, who will?" Ferdinand rolled his eyes. You want it?" Guan Weiwu looked at his disciple. Yu Qianqiu nodded pitifully. "Oh." Guan Weiwu patted his forehead and said, I forgot. You should have a building foundation pill." Then he said to a disciple who had just passed by, "Go and call Yin Shu for me." Hearing Yin Shu was called, Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt a little bad. Sure enough, after Yin Shu came, He saw Yu Qianqiu at a glance. The two of them had a feeling of enmity when they met. Yan Shu, give me a building foundation pill. Guan Weiwu said. Building foundation pill? Yan Shu was a little confused and said, Elder Guan, other than the sex building foundation pills, the rest have been distributed. Where would I have a building foundation pill? Guan Weiwu frowned and said, Nonsense, where's Yu Qianqiu's? He should have one. Yan Shu looked at Yu Qianqiu and immediately understood what was going on. He was secretly happy. In fact, when Fu Xian Island reported disciples who needed building foundation pills, the Alchemy Pavilion was the one who reported it to Yan Shu. At that time, he thought of Yu Qianqiu. The latter was borrowed by Wanfen Garden. Should the Alchemy Pavilion report it? Because the two of them had a grudge, he had the idea of using public office to take revenge. He decided not to report it to Yu Qianqiu. If Wanfen Garden reported it, it would be fine. If not, then Yu Qianqiu was unlucky. Anyway, he had a reason, so he could not be blamed. He did not expect such a thing to really happen. Elder, at that time, Yu Qianqiu had already been transferred away. It should have been reported by the place where he was, so we did not report it here. Naturally, there was no building foundation pill for him. Now, how could this disciple take out the building foundation pill? Yan Shu said helplessly. Yu Qianqiu was a little dizzy. Both sides had actually forgotten about him. He was afraid that Yan Shu had done it deliberately. Ferdinand glanced at Yan Shu coldly and snorted, Nonsense. My own disciple still needs others to report it. If I say it to others, they will think that I am Yu Qianqiu's master. Guan Weiwu scratched his messy hair. In his opinion, both sides were reasonable. In fact, it was a misunderstanding. He could not help but say, What should I do? I can't do anything about it. Ferdinand sneered. Hee, you can't do anything about it. You can talk to Jiugu yourself. Yu Qianqiu was personally ordered by Jiugu to bring him to you. I can't stand it when she gets angry. Don't blame me for dragging you down with me. Ah, it's Jiugu. Guan Weiwu's face twitched. Obviously, he was very afraid of Ma Jiugu. So he said to Ferdinand in a negotiating tone, Why don't you take some spirit grass from the 10,000 fragrance garden to refine the building foundation pill, and I will refine it again. Fart. The 10,000 fragrance garden only has a few spirit grass to refine the building foundation pill. Especially the main ingredients. They are very difficult to grow. Do you think the spirit grass is like chives? After a few days of cutting, you can grow another batch? Ferdinand said in a bad mood. This is a big problem. Guan Weiwu's face was full of worry. His eyes glanced at Yan Shu on the side, and he suddenly said angrily, It's all your fault for not being reliable. I punish you to immediately think of a way. Otherwise, your alchemy pavilion deacon position will be handed over to someone else. Chapter 68. Yan Shu, who was secretly laughing at the side, was stunned by the scolding. Originally, he could hide on the side and watch the fun after taking revenge. Who knew that Guan Weiwu's way of thinking was not reasonable at all? He actually vented his anger on him. However, his brain was really good. After a little hesitation, he thought of a way and said, The refined elixirs are distributed to the disciples on the island, and the rest are kept by the faction. If the two elders find the head and explain the situation, I think the head will definitely make an exception. Yes, Guan Weiwu nodded. Ferdinand also agreed. Then let's go. What are we waiting for? Let's go. Guan Weiwu took the lead and flew away. You go with us. Ferdinand grabbed Yu Qianqiu and flew away. Yan Shu looked at the three people flying away and smiled evilly. Yesterday, he learned from his father that the few remaining foundation establishment elixirs in the faction had been given out as a favor. Before flying away, Yu Qianqiu subconsciously turned his head to look at Yan Shu. He could clearly see the smile on Yan Shu's face as if his scheme had succeeded. He couldn't help but feel his heart skip a beat. If he hadn't guessed wrong, this trip would have been in vain. Yan Shu, if I still can't get the foundation establishment elixir this time, this matter must be related to you. If you dare to ruin my big plan, I swear to kill you. Yu Qianqiu's heart was filled with killing intent. Even Ferdinand, who was holding him and flying, was shocked. With his cultivation and being so close to Yu Qianqiu, he could naturally feel the strong killing intent of the person in his hand. It was not the kind of resentment of ordinary people, but the kind of iron-blooded ruthlessness of holding the power of life and death, and deciding the life and death of others. He could not help but look at him a few more times. He thought to himself that an ordinary disciple in the qi refinement stage could make Aunt Jiu pay so much attention to him. This kid's origin was probably not ordinary. When the two landed in front of the Prenglai Pavilion, Guan Weiwu had already entered. Looking at Yu Qianqiu, who looked pitiful at first but now had an ice-cold expression, Ferdinand asked, "Yu Qianqiu, what happened to you? I'm afraid we've come here for nothing again." Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly as he raised his head and looked at the room on the third floor. Ferdinand smiled and said, "You worry too much. The sect will always keep a few elixirs in reserve every time. Since Elder Guan and I came together, the sect leader will still give us some face. I hope it's not Yin Shu's doing." Yu Qianqiu's eyes narrowed as a cold light flashed through them. "Yin Shu?" Ferdinand was taken aback and asked doubtfully, "Are you saying that Yin Shu, the son of Elder Yin Tua, is playing tricks just now?" Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, "I have a grudge with this person. The alchemy pavilion doesn't have my Zhuji Dan. I'm afraid he did it on purpose." He suddenly raised his hand and pointed at the Prenglai Pavilion and sneered, "I hope I'm wrong." Ferdinand looked thoughtfully at Yu Qianqiu, whose temperament was completely different from before. "Old Fei, why don't you come up? What are you doing downstairs? Come up." Guan Weiwu poked his head out from the window on the second floor. "Let's go. We'll talk after we see the sect leader," Ferdinand said. Yu Qianqiu nodded and did not say anything. Prenglai Pavilion was still the same. Yu Qianqiu used to dream of getting an office here one day. Those who could have a room here were all at the level of an elder. Prenglai Pavilion still looked the same as the government office building in his previous life. But now he was not in the mood. When the three of them came to the sect leader's room, Guan Weiwu shouted, "Is the sect leader in? Come in." The sect leader's majestic voice came from inside. Guan Weiwu pushed the door open. The three of them walked in and greeted first, "Sect leader." When the sect leader Feng Xiangtian saw it was Elder Guan and Elder Fei, he nodded and smiled. When he saw Yu Qianqiu behind the two of them, he could not help but be stunned. This Yu Qianqiu left a deep impression on him. He had almost brought him a lot of trouble. He had also heard about the matter of Yu Qianqiu being seconded by Ferdinand to Wamfen Garden to raise spirit herbs, but he did not take it to heart. Now that this group came, could it be that something had happened? "What are you guys doing?" Feng Xiangtian asked doubtfully. Guan Weiwu was the first to speak. He explained everything in detail, and then said, "Sect leader, just give me a foundation building Dan." Feng Xiangtian looked at the three of them, and finally landed on Yu Qianqiu. He said, "No, it's useless to look for me." Ferdinand looked at Yu Qianqiu in surprise, thinking that Yu Qianqiu had guessed correctly, but he still asked, "Aren't there more Zhuji elixirs?" "No." Feng Xiangtian shook his head. "Senior brother, you can't be so stingy, right?" Guan Weiwu glared and said angrily, "If we were outside, even my disciples would have to call you martial uncle. You can't even bear to give a foundation establishment pill? My father even passed the position of sect leader to you. You don't even give me this little face." Bullsh *T. Feng Xiangtian was furious when he heard this. He pointed his finger and scolded, "What does this have to do with master passing me the position of sect leader? How dare you say such words? Your silly master can even forget his own disciples' foundation establishment pill. How dare you come here to make a scene? If it was someone else, I would have thrown him out long ago. There's no foundation establishment pill. If you're not convinced, you can follow me to Heaven Heart Pavilion to argue with master. Let's see how master will deal with you." Hearing that they were going to Heaven Heart Pavilion, Guan Weiwu's anger was immediately extinguished and he was speechless. Yu Qianqiu now knew that the previous sect leader was the current sect leader's master. Moreover, he was Guan Weiwu's father. In that case, he did not choose the wrong master. He was actually from the same lineage as the sect leader. Seeing that the gang leader of Fuxian Island was angry, He wanted to say a few words to explain for Master. However, the level here was too high, and it was not his place to interrupt. Sect leader, don't blame old Guan. This matter was ordered by Ninth Aunt. We are really afraid that we can't explain it to Ninth Aunt when we go back. Please help us think of a way. Ferdinand smiled bitterly. Feng Xiangtian was stunned and said in surprise, "Why does this matter involve Ninth Aunt? Why would she?" He glanced at Yu Qianqiu and did not finish his words. However, everyone could hear the meaning in his words. The sect leader's recuperation prevented him from finishing his words in front of the younger disciples. Ferdinand shook his head and said, "I don't know. Sect leader, if there are more foundation-building elixirs, just give one. It's not a big deal." In the eyes of these tribulation cultivators, the foundation-building elixir was naturally not a good thing. It was not even a tonic. Feng Xiangtian glanced at Guan Weiwu, who was standing on the side without saying anything. He stood up slowly and said, "It's not that we don't want to give it to you. It's just that you are a day late. Yesterday, we received a Jade Archive letter from the Moon Clan leader, Chonghua Fairy. She said that she urgently needed a batch of foundation-building elixirs and asked for Fuxian Island's help. You also know that the Moon Clan and Fuxian Island have always been on good terms. Moreover, Chonghua Fairy personally asked for it. Naturally, Fuxian Island has to help. I have already asked Elder Qin to personally send the remaining 20 foundation-building elixirs on the island to the Moon Clan. How do you expect me to take out more foundation-building elixirs now? Cabbages, yellow in the fields, lost their mother at the age of 3 or 2. There was no need to mention how bitter Yu Qianqiu's heart was. Tears flowed uncontrollably from his stomach. His life was even more bitter than that of a cabbage. Although Yen Shu was unavoidable in this matter, he could not control the Moon Clan. They were the third largest sect in the cultivation world. How could a disciple in the last stage of the core formation realm influence them? How could such a coincidence happen to him? If this was not a bitter life, what was? Chapter 69. It was such a coincidence. Ferdinand and Guan Weiwu looked at each other, then looked at the dejected Yu Qianqiu, and felt that he was a poor child. Elder Ferdinand, can you refine another batch of foundation establishment pills with the spiritual herbs of your Wanfen garden? Feng Xiangtian asked. Guan Weiwu had asked the same question, but Ferdinand shook his head and said, "There are a few, and there are still a few main ingredients that are not mature yet. They can't be used to refine pills at all. I'm afraid we still need to wait for another 2 years." Feng Xiangtian nodded and said, "Then there's no other way, but we didn't do a good job on this matter. You two elders are also responsible. Some things can't let the disciples be wronged. We still have to compensate them. How about this? Yu Qianqiu, what do you think about this?" Feng Xiangtian pondered and said, "In the next 3 years, when the foundation establishment pills are distributed, in addition to the foundation establishment pill you deserve, you will get 1 more, and then 1 more as compensation. I will give you 3 pills at a time. If you still can't build the foundation, it won't affect you getting 2 more chances in the future. What do you think?" The 2 elders nodded in agreement to the sect leader's words. This deal was worth it. It meant that other people had 3 chances to reach the foundation establishment stage. Because Yu Qianqiu had effected his first attempt, he had obtained 5 chances. Basically, it could be said that his chances of reaching the foundation establishment stage were certain. I can get a total of 5 foundation establishment pills? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. It was good, but it was a pity to waste 3 years. These old guys had no concept of time. It couldn't be helped. They were people who lived for hundreds of years. In their eyes, 2 or 3 years was really nothing. However, things were already like this. The head had also made compensation. If he still didn't agree, it would be a bit too much. He could only salute and said, "Thank you, head." "Okay, let's do it this way," Feng Xiangtian said and looked at the 3 people and asked, "Is there anything else?" Since it was like this, the 3 people had nothing else to say. They naturally saluted and left. After leaving the Penglai Pavilion, Guan Weiwu, who had been silent for a long time, asked, "Yu Qianqiu, are you willing to return to the elixir refining pavilion with me?" After such a thing happened, Yu Qianqiu felt a little sad and replied, I will listen to master's arrangements. Just as Guan Weiwu was about to speak, he heard Ferdinand say, Go back? Yu Qianqiu's matter is something neither you nor I can decide. Old Guan, if you want someone, you should talk to Jiugu yourself. Otherwise, if Jiugu sees me going back alone, the Slayer wand in her hand is not something to be trifled with. You won't be able to escape. Guan Weiwu was stunned. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, Then you should go back to the mulberry garden first. We'll talk about the matter of returning to the alchemy pavilion in the future. Don't worry, I'll remember everything. Got it, master. Yu Qianqiu nodded. Old Guan, I have to take Yu Qianqiu back to report to Jiugu. After Ferdinand finished speaking, he grabbed Yu Qianqiu and flew away. In a few moments, the two returned to the outside of the mulberry garden. Ferdinand dared to fly out with Yu Qianqiu, but he did not dare to fly in without permission. If he did that, it would be disrespectful to Ma Jiugu. The two of them walked back obediently. When he saw the old man, Ferdinand reported everything that had happened in full detail. After listening, Ma Jiugu looked at Yu Qianqiu, who had his head down, and then looked at Yan Zixia, who was staring at him with pity. She sighed and said, 3 years is not long for you young people, but for us old guys it's not short. But for us old fellows, it's not a short time. I don't know how many more 3 years I can live. Elder Lan, who was accompanying her, said with a smile, Jiugu, you must be joking. With your profound cultivation, sooner or later you will step into the spirit-severing stage. At that time, it won't be a problem for you to live for thousands of years. Bingxue is right. It's only a matter of time before you break through to the tribulation passing stage. Ferdinand also smiled and flattered. Ma Jiugu shook her head and said, The Great Way is ruthless. It's really rare for someone to step into the spirit-severing stage in the cultivation world. I know you're saying good things, but I've lived for more than 500 years, and I know my own situation. I don't have any extravagant hopes. I just hope that the younger generation can have that day. After saying that, she looked at Yan Zixia and Yu Qianqiu kindly. From the old woman's words, if she couldn't make a breakthrough in her cultivation, she was afraid that she would not be far from death. Yu Qianqiu looked up and wanted to comfort her by saying that she would live for a long time. However, when he thought that she had already lived for a long time, he couldn't say it. There was a short silence in the hall. It's all Ferdinand's fault. Otherwise, our Yu Qianqiu might be able to reach the foundation building stage today. Lan Bingxue complained to Ferdinand. Yu Qianqiu had also become Yu Qianqiu. Obviously, he knew what the old woman meant and treated him as one of their own. Ferdinand wanted to explain, but he was speechless when he saw the old woman. All right, you can't blame Ferdinand for this. You have a lot of things to do. Go back and do your own thing. Ma Jiugu said. Ferdinand thought that it would be awkward to stay here. After bowing to Ma Jiugu, he patted Yu Qianqiu's shoulder to comfort him and left. To be honest, after this incident, Yu Qianqiu didn't know why the people in the mulberry garden valued him so much, but he felt everyone's kindness. Although there was still a bit of self-protection in his subconscious, he finally felt a little bit of humanity in the mulberry garden. Yu Qianqiu, you have suffered a lot. Now you have to wait for the next 3 years. Ma Jiugu said regretfully. It's a pity that the spirit herbs in the mulberry garden are not mature yet. Otherwise, I will personally refine a furnace of foundation building pills to help you break through to the foundation building stage in one fell swoop. Suffering a lot? Not at all. People are animals with feelings. It was enough to hear the old woman's words. But he couldn't afford to wait. Ong Kwangsung and Chu Ping, who had been waiting for his arrival with great longing. Although he had never said it to anyone, it was a solemn promise a man made to a woman. It was a promise to a woman who treated him sincerely. It was a promise he didn't dare to break. It was not about whether he was a cultivator, or whether he loved her or not. If he was a real man, he must fulfill his promise to that woman. This road was full of difficulties, but he must move forward bravely. He, Yu Qianqiu, dared to betray heaven and earth, but he didn't dare to betray someone who was sincere to him. especially a woman who was sincere to him. Otherwise, he would feel like there was a thorn in his back for the rest of his life. He wouldn't be able to eat or sleep well. And he wouldn't be able to rest in peace for the rest of his life. In his previous life, he was able to rise from a nameless nobody to a famous underworld boss. This was all because of his loyalty and commitment. This creed had been deeply ingrained in his bones and soul. This was the foundation that he absolutely did not dare to abandon. Otherwise, he would lose the meaning of living. It would be the same in this life. This was his fate. It was his Yuchincho's life. How could he fulfill his promise with his current cultivation? A year had passed, and now he had to wait for another 3 years? Even if he waited for a moment, it meant that Chu Ping-er had to wait for him for a moment, let alone waiting for another 3 years. His heart was uneasy, and it was difficult for others to understand his heart. He suffered silently. There were some things that needed to be said. In the main hall, Yuchincho suddenly knelt down in front of Ma Jiugu. "Ah!" Yan Zixia and Lan Bingxue exclaimed. Ma Jiugu, who was leaning on her walking stick, suddenly opened her drooping eyelids and said solemnly, "Yuchincho, why are you doing this?" Chapter 70. There is a saying that men have gold under their knees, and they should not kneel lightly. In his previous life, he had never knelt before anyone. He had only knelt and cried in front of his deceased parents. In this life, he had only knelt before his master. So what if he knelt again for a promise? Not to mention that the old lady was old enough to be his ancestor. So there was nothing wrong with kneeling. Yuchincho shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "Disciple requests a favor from Jiugu. This matter is really difficult to speak of, so I have no choice but to kneel down and beg." Ma Jiugu's open eyelids drooped again. She walked several steps with the help of her crutch. She stared at him and asked, "What is it that makes you kneel down and beg?" The other 2 women also stared at him. "Damn it! Do you think I like kneeling?" Yuchincho thought for a while and said, "I want to ask Jiugu for some spiritual herb seeds needed to concoct the foundation-building elixir." Yan Zixia and Lan Bingxue were stunned. Both of them thought they had heard it wrong. It was understandable if he wanted foundation-building pills. But if he wanted seeds, could it be that he wanted to plant his own spiritual herbs and concoct pills? There's no need for that. If he waited for more than 3 years, he would be able to obtain 3 foundation establishment pills in one go. Naturally, Ma Jiugu had also thought of the same thing. In fact, she had thought even more than them. "Stand up and talk first," Ma Jiugu asked. "Do you want to keep the seed or give it to someone else?" She thought that maybe Yuchincho was sent by another sect. Yan Zixia was slightly surprised. She had also thought of this possibility. She knew that Yuchincho was from Kwang-sung, who liked to kneel. No one was born to be a slave. Yuchincho stood up and said, "This disciple wants it for himself." Ma Jiugu asked indifferently, "Grow your own spiritual herbs?" "Yes." "You want to concoct a foundation-building pill yourself?" "Yes." "Refine it for your own use?" "Yes." This old woman doesn't understand. You can obviously get 3 foundation establishment pills in 3 years. So why did you do this? Ma Jiugu turned around and asked, "Can you tell me why?" Yuchincho hesitated for a moment, then said resolutely, "I promise." "For a promise, otherwise I can wait 3 years." "I still don't understand. You have stayed in the mulberry garden for a long time. You should know that it is very difficult to grow the several main ingredients of the building foundation pill. Even if you can grow it, even if I give you seeds, you won't be able to grow it in 3 years. If that's the case, you might as well wait another 3 years. I don't know if I'm muddle-headed, but I can't calculate this debt clearly. Yuchincho, can you give me an explanation?" Ma Jiugu gently poked the ground with her walking stick. Yuchincho paused, then shook his head and said, "This disciple can't explain it clearly." Naturally, he couldn't tell her the secret of the golden pearl. "Oh," Ma Jiugu replied and walked a few steps with the help of her crutch. She stopped and said, "You know the rules of Fuxian Island. Spirit grasses and seeds are not allowed to be spread to outsiders." Yuchincho also knew the rules. While he was feeling dejected, Ma Jiugu said, "Speaking of which, you are also a disciple of Fuxian Island." Giving the seeds to you is not considered spreading them to outsiders. Giving the seeds to a disciple to grow privately is not something that has been done, but I can give it to you. Yu Qianqiu was stunned, and so were Yan Zixia and Lan Bingxue. The condition is that you can't spread the seeds of Fuxian Island to outsiders. If you don't abide by this rule, I will never give you the seeds, Ma Jugu said with her back facing him. Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed and quickly said, "This disciple will absolutely not give the seeds to anyone." He didn't expect that Ma Jugu would agree. "Good. You must remember what you said today. If you dare to violate it, not only will I be breaking the rules, but you will also be breaking the rules. At that time, even if you run to the ends of the earth, I will still crush your bones and scatter your ashes. Do you believe me?" Ma Jugu was old, but her indifferent words were filled with unquestionable confidence. With Ma Jugu's cultivation level, Yu Qianqiu certainly believed that she had the strength to kill someone else. However, he had the golden bead, and the white fox, who was also in the late stage of passing tribulation, was also in the golden bead. No matter how confident she was, it was useless. However, it was completely unnecessary. Yu Qianqiu never thought of giving the seeds to others, so he immediately said cautiously, "This disciple, Yu Qianqiu, swears to the heavens that I will absolutely not give the seeds to anyone, or I will die a horrible death." In the cultivation world, oaths were the most taboo. What cultivators did was originally in defiance of the heavens, and if they violated an oath, they would often have to obey an oath. This was not a joke. Don't agree too early. I still have something that I need you to agree to before I will give you the seeds. Ma Jugu turned around and stared at him with a smile. "There is still a condition?" Yu Qianqiu slightly frowned, but he still respectfully said, "Senior, please speak." Ma Jugu looked at Yan Zixia and slowly said, "Since you are a person who attaches importance to promises, then this old woman wants a promise from you. As long as you agree to this old woman's promise, I will immediately give you the spiritual herb seeds." "Promise? What promise?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Yan Zixia and Lan Bingxue also looked at Ma Jugu, not knowing what kind of promise she wanted. Ma Jugu shook her head and said, "Promise this old woman first." Yu Qianqiu hesitated. How could he casually agree to this kind of thing? What if she asked him to die, or something that he couldn't do? How could he agree to it? Ma Jugu knew that he had misgivings, so she smiled and said, "This old woman's promise is not difficult for you to fulfill, and it won't hurt you. Moreover, it will give you great benefits. Do you agree or not?" Yu Qianqiu didn't believe in such a thing, but he couldn't resist the temptation of the spiritual herb seeds and timidly said, "If it's really as Venerable Ma Jugu said, then disciple Yu Qianqiu will naturally agree. Senior, please speak." But in his heart he added, "If it's something I can't do, then don't blame me for going back on my words." Ma Jugu rarely laughed and said, "Good. Since you agree, I also believe that you are a person who keeps your promise. As for what the promise is, we can talk about it later. Perhaps there is no need to say it in the future. I will naturally tell you when the time comes. You just need to remember that you owe me a promise." Yan Zixia and Lan Bingxue looked at each other, not knowing what this old woman was talking about. On the other hand, Yu Qianqiu felt strange and felt that there was a big conspiracy waiting for him. Ma Jugu was very happy, so she poked him with her walking stick and said, "Little last Lan, prepare 10 spiritual herb seeds for refining the foundation establishment pill, and give them to him. Go now." "Yes." Lan Bingxue went to get the seeds with a belly full of doubts. "Thank you, Venerable Ma Jugu." Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly. Logically speaking, he should be happy after obtaining something he dreamed of. However, he couldn't bring himself to be happy. He didn't know if exchanging a promise for a spirit grass seed was a loss or a gain. For now he could only take one step at a time. Not long after, Lan Bingxue came back with a small cloth bag and handed it to Yu Qianqiu. "Open it and see if it's what you want." Yu Qianqiu stuffed it into his storage bag without hesitation and said with a smile, "No need. How can it be wrong when Elder Lan personally took it? Disciple thanks Elder Lan." Lan Bingxue smiled and returned to Ma Jiugu's side. She and Yan Zixia were a bit confused. First of all, they didn't know why Yu Qianqiu wanted the seeds. Saying that he wanted to plant spiritual herbs didn't seem very credible. Moreover, Ma Jugu's promise was also very confusing. After asking if there was nothing wrong, Yu Qianqiu left the inner garden. When he came out, he saw Hibiscus working. He didn't greet her, and excitedly returned to the small house and disappeared. Chapter 71. Amidst the sea of flowers, two diligent gardeners were hard at work. The white fox, dressed in white, was strolling amidst the flowers not far away. From time to time, she would bend over and smell the alluring fragrance. Guan Yu and Chen Feng would steal glances at her from time to time. After all, such a beautiful woman was rare. Not rare, but they had never seen one before. The two of them did not know that the white fox was a vixen. When the two of them first came here, they were quite conflicted. After a long time, they realized that accompanying such a beautiful woman and working in the sea of flowers every day was not necessarily a bad thing. There were no schemes, no disputes, and the two of them gradually got used to and began to enjoy life here. After spending a long time with the two of them, they became familiar with each other. The white fox also gradually began to talk to the two of them. Jing Jing walked to the two of them and saw that another piece of land had opened up. She looked around and suggested, "It's best if we can plant purple flowers here." "All right, we'll listen to Miss White." "Chen Feng, let's plant violet flowers here." Guan Yu laughed. Chen Feng agreed with a hum, then turned his head and asked, "Miss White, why haven't I seen boss in a long time?" He was now full of admiration for Yu Qianqiu. He had never seen such a talented young man. "I don't know," the white fox replied softly. She looked at the empty bamboo house in the distant forest, and a trace of disappointment appeared in her eyes. "What's wrong? Does everyone miss me?" Haha. Yu Qianqiu suddenly appeared behind everyone and laughed. Guan Yu laughed as well. "Speak of the devil." This was a saying he realized when he listened to Yu Qianqiu talk about the three kingdoms. "Let's not talk about anything else. Yinchang Chen Feng, don't plant these flowers in the future. I have something important for you to do." Yu Qianqiu laughed. Guan Yu and Chen Feng looked at the white fox suspiciously. Seeing that the latter did not object, Guan Yu asked, "What is it?" Haha. Yu Qianqiu suddenly threw his head back and laughed. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing why he was so happy. However, the white fox seemed to hear a tinge of sadness in his laughter, and looked at him quietly. After venting his anger through laughter, Yu Qianqiu patted Guan Yu's shoulder and said, "Yunchang, do you remember what I told you before? You talk too much. Which sentence do you want me to remember?" Guan Yu curled his lips and smiled. Yu Qianqiu was in a good mood today, so he didn't mind at all. "I've told you before that you'll be able to successfully build your foundation within 10 years. Guan Yu nodded and said, "Yes, but I have long since given up hope." Yu Qianqiu was taken aback. He rubbed his nose and sighed. "Sigh. Since you don't have any hope, then forget it. During this time, I learned alchemy on supporting Immortal Island. It just so happened that I got the spiritual herb seeds needed to refine the foundation building pill today. Since you don't want it anymore, then Chen Feng and I will do it. Yunchang, you continue to plant your flowers." "What?" Guan Yu and Chen Feng were taken aback. Then they cried out at the same time. "Spiritual herb seeds?" The two of them knew that any kind of plant seeds could be planted here. If there really were spiritual herb seeds, what would it mean? After all, Guan Yu had stayed on supporting Immortal Island before. He understood the situation better than Chen Feng. The spiritual herb seeds on supporting Immortal Island weren't something that could be easily obtained. He didn't have the ability to do it. Moreover, Yu Qianqiu said that he had learned alchemy. If it was someone else, a qi condensation disciple would only be doing odd jobs and wouldn't have the qualifications to learn alchemy. If what Yu Qianqiu said was true, then this big brother Yu really wasn't your average kind of powerful. He, Guan Yu, was completely convinced. "Chen Feng, let's go and find a place to plant the spiritual herb," Yu Qianqiu said proudly. "Wait." Guan Yu grabbed Yu Qianqiu's arm. The latter smiled and said, "Yunchang, what's wrong? You still want to fight with me? You're overestimating yourself." No. Boss, you misunderstood. I just want to ask you a few questions. Guan Yu smiled apologetically. Oh. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, I'm in a good mood today. Go ahead. Guan Yu grabbed his arm and didn't let go. Who did you worship when you entered supporting Immortal Island? The same surname as you, Guan Weiwu. Elder Guan is the elder in charge of the alchemy pavilion. It's possible that you can learn alchemy. Guan Yu gulped and asked again. Then where did you steal the spiritual herb seeds from? Bullshit. Yu Qianqiu struggled to free his arm and said, Do you think I'm the kind of person who would do such a thing? The seeds were personally given by Ma Jugu from the mulberry garden. Ah, the legendary Jugu, who has reached the late stage of tribulation passing? Why would she give you the seeds? Guan Yu was surprised. What's so strange about that? I have a good relationship with her. I'm living in the mulberry garden now and eating well every day. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and said, If you don't believe me, then forget it. I can't be bothered with you. Go plant your flowers. Chenfeng, let's go plant spiritual herbs. Wait. Guan Yu smiled apologetically and said, Boss, I was wrong. I shouldn't have doubted you. I'll accompany you to plant spiritual herbs. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and said with a proud smile, Since we've known each other for so long, I won't argue with you. Quickly find a place and hurry up and start working. He didn't want to waste any more time teasing him. Moreover, he also wanted to plant the spiritual herbs as soon as possible. The white fox frowned slightly when she saw the jubilant expressions of the three of them. She did not believe that Yu Qianqiu had obtained these items easily like he had said. Otherwise, why would he have been so depressed over the past year without showing any signs of it? Boss, what do you think about planting it here? This is the land that Chenfeng and I have just plowed. Guan Yu nodded and pointed to the side of the land. This was the first time he talked to Yu Qianqiu like this. Moreover, it was so shameless. On the side, Chenfeng was so excited that he didn't know where to put his hands and feet. He kept rubbing his palms. Before he met Yu Qianqiu, he was worried about spirit stones. Unexpectedly, after coming here, spirit stones were so abundant that he didn't dare to use them even if he wanted to. Now he even had the opportunity to obtain a foundation establishment pill. After taking it, he could step into the foundation establishment stage. His old dream. Wait a moment. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand in a very magnanimous manner. Guan Yu and Chenfeng were stunned. They didn't know what this boss was going to do next. Yu Qianqiu held a small cloth bag in his hand and said with a serious expression, Refining a foundation establishment pill requires 9 kinds of spiritual herbs. Ma Jugu gave me 10 sets of seeds for each kind. Everyone must be careful. You can only try to plant it and not fail. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that I will get it again. Do you understand? Although he was suspected of taking this opportunity to increase his prestige, the two people involved didn't think so. Instead, they thought what he said was very reasonable. They also said with a serious expression, Understood. The white fox, who was a few steps away, pursed her lips, turned her head and smiled sweetly. Yu Qianqiu carefully opened the cloth bag. There were 9 small porcelain bottles inside. He took out one and handed it to Chenfeng. Chenfeng, there should be 10 seeds inside. I also don't know what kind of spiritual herb it is. Try to plant one first. This was the seed of a spiritual herb used to refine a foundation establishment pill. Chenfeng's hands couldn't help but tremble. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and scolded. Damn it! Useless thing. Why are your hands trembling? If it breaks, can you afford to pay for it? Guan Yu, why are you in a daze? I'm talking to you. Don't just stand there and watch. Help Chenfeng plant it. Seeing him gesticulating and scolding to his heart's content, the white fox, who had just turned her head, turned back again. Got it. Guan Yu immediately realized his mistake. He hurriedly took a bucket of water and squatted down to dig a small hole in the loose ground. He also untied the bamboo tube hanging on his waist and was ready to use it at any time. Chapter 72. Chenfeng removed the stopper from the small porcelain bottle and carefully poured a small seed into his palm. Then he plugged the stopper back in. The seed was gently placed into the small hole. Guan Yu quickly scooped out a spoonful of purple chaos from the bamboo tube and added it into the hole. Chen Feng quickly covered the hole with soil. Guan Yu scooped out a spoonful of water from a bucket and poured it over the hole. After doing all this, the two of them exhaled and subconsciously wiped their sweaty foreheads. Then they slowly stood up. The 4 pairs of eyes, including the white fox, stared intently at the small patch of ground that was soaked in water. After a long time, there was still no reaction from the small patch of ground. This was a little abnormal. Chen Feng and Guan Yu looked at each other. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, "How can this be? Did you notice anything unusual about the purple chaos and the water while you were planting the flowers?" Chen Feng shook his head and said, "No. Quick look, there's a reaction." Guan Yu exclaimed in surprise. A few cracks quietly appeared on the small patch of ground that was previously wet. Everyone stared in surprise, but after waiting for a long time, there was another reaction. They saw a small white sprout poking its head out. Then it slowly grew at an extremely slow speed. This speed was almost negligible compared to the speed at which the flowers grew. "The speed is too slow. How can this be?" Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, "Is there any way to make it grow faster?" "Yes." Guan Yu stared at the sprout and replied, "If we add more purple chaos, it should be able to speed it up. Boss, do you want to add it?" Yu Qianqiu exhaled and said, "Let's do it. There are still 9 seeds left. At most, we can just waste one." Guan Yu nodded and pulled out a thin bamboo tube from his belt. Yu Qianqiu took a closer look. It was a bamboo tube with a piston, made using the syringe principle from his previous world. He couldn't help but smile. It seemed like these 2 guys were experienced in planting flowers. They must have sped up the growth of the flowers. With Chen Feng's help, the bamboo tube was filled with purple chaos. Guan Yu knelt down and carefully inserted the slender end of the tube into the soil under the white sprout. Then he slowly pressed the other end of the wooden handle down. As the purple chaos in the bamboo tube was completely poured into it, the sprout visibly trembled, as if it had eaten something. Its growth rate also increased significantly. Guan Yu pulled out the bamboo tube and quickly covered the hole in the ground with soil. After standing up, he looked at the sprout and nodded. "Boss, it looks like we can still get another tube. Do you want another tube? Failure is the mother of success. Don't be afraid, just do it." Yu Qianqiu agreed. Guan Yu and Chen Feng cooperated to give the sprout another injection. The effect was very obvious. Although it was still a lot slower than the flowers, it was still very fast. Guan Yu exclaimed, "Spiritual grass is indeed spiritual grass. It really is extraordinary. It has already used a dozen times more purple chaos than the flowers, but it is still growing slower than the flowers." The things that grew out of the sprout were not very good looking. Although it was still growing, it was only the size of a palm. It was still black, and didn't look like a spiritual grass at all. Guan Yu and Chen Feng had never seen it before. Yu Qianqiu said with a smile, "Chen Feng, this is the dirt-repelling grass. It is one of the essential spiritual grass for refining the building foundation Dan. I will leave the bottle in your hand to you for safekeeping. In the future, this dirt-repelling grass will be planted by you. Remember to collect a lot of seeds. Don't let the seeds break. If they break, there will be no place to plant them." Chen Feng nodded. Not long after, a few flower stems came out of the dirt-repelling grass. The flower buds on top of the stems slowly rose up. When they reached a certain position, the flower buds swelled up from the black leaves. When the flower buds began to slightly open, a faintly discernible fragrance overflowed. It was this faintly discernible flower fragrance that completely suppressed the fragrance of the surrounding sea of flowers. It really is a spiritual grass. Just the fragrance of this flower has suppressed the fragrance of the thousands of flowers here. Chen Feng couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. The white fox gently fanned her jade-like nose. She moved closer and took a deep breath. It seemed like she also liked this fragrance. The 6 flowers had completely bloomed. There were a few short golden hairs hidden in the pale white petals. It was very beautiful. Yu Qianqiu shouted in a deep voice, "Yunchang, balance the yin and yang. Pollinate the flowers. Don't waste even a single seed." He had already brought in a few hives of bees. However, because of the purple chaos, the flower's flowering period was too short. Obviously, there wasn't enough time for the bees to pollinate it. Got it. Guan Yu's movements were light and quick as he pollinated the 6 flowers. He didn't pick one flower first and pollinate it like normal flowers. For this spiritual grass, wasting one flower meant wasting a lot of precious seeds. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the plucked seeds were already in Chen Feng's hands. This flower was also very strange. One flower could bear 6 seeds. 6 flowers were exactly 36 seeds. The few of them happily looked at the plucked seeds. Unfortunately, because of the purple chaos, the dirt-repelling grass didn't last long before it withered. However, the success of the dirt-repelling grass gave the 3 of them a lot of confidence. Yu Qianqiu tested the other 8 bottles one by one. In the end, he found out that ginseng was the easiest to plant. After it grew under the soil, no matter how much purple chaos he put in, it would only increase its age quickly. It wouldn't wilt. The seeds were even easier to pluck. Basically, it would flower and bear fruit once in a year. The seeds could be plucked many times. He also found some problems. It turned out that the diamond fruit was a vine plant. It wasn't easy to grow on flat ground. It needed to be in a place with trees, so that it could be easily entangled. One plant could only bear 12 fruits. The fruits it bore were really worthy of the name diamond. Even with a sword, one could only leave a white mark on it. The most troublesome one was the lingji. When the porcelain bottle was opened, they only saw some powder inside. It wasn't a seed at all. The 3 of them were a little dumbfounded. Yu Qianqiu had never come across this thing in the mulberry garden. He didn't know how to plant it. He regretted not asking Farong. Maybe she knew. It was all thanks to the white fox. She cultivated in the deep mountains and forests. She had seen a lot of things like this. With her explanation, the 3 of them finally understood. The lingji didn't matter if it was a seed or not. Once it was crushed, it would naturally become a seed. No wonder the porcelain bottle was filled with powder. This made Yu Qianqiu remember some knowledge from his previous life. This lingji should also be a kind of fungus. Finally, under the white fox's guidance, they succeeded in planting it next to the roots of the big tree. After each success, Yu Qianqiu finally let out a sigh of relief. He gave the 9 porcelain bottles to Guan Yu and Chen Feng. 3 days later, I'm going to start refining foundation building pills. I want 100 of each of the 9 kinds of spiritual plants. Can you guys grow them? Yu Qianqiu looked at the 2 of them. The 2 of them looked at each other. Guan Yu asked, "You want so many?" Yu Qianqiu nodded and said solemnly, "I want to refine enough foundation building pills in one go. I don't believe that with a lot of foundation building pills, the 3 of us can't build our foundation successfully." In fact, the reason why he asked for so many was because he had never personally refined foundation building pills before. He didn't have the slightest confidence, so he was prepared to use spiritual plants to build them. He believed that even if he was lucky, he could still refine 1 or 2 batches. Hearing that they could refine enough foundation building pills, Guan Yu and Chen Feng were so excited that their eyes glowed green. The 2 of them looked at each other and nodded. Guan Yu excitedly patted his chest and promised, "Boss, don't worry. Even if we don't eat or sleep for these 3 days, we'll help you grow those 100 batches." Yu Qianqiu happily said, "Good. When the time comes, we'll have enough foundation building pills. I believe we can definitely build our foundation successfully." Suddenly, he frowned and said, "You too, don't just ignore the quality of the spiritual plants just to make up the numbers. Especially the ginseng and the lingji. They must be at least 100 years old. Otherwise, they can't be considered as spiritual plants." This was related to whether or not they could successfully build their foundation, so the 2 of them immediately promised again and again. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly went back. He still wanted to look for Yan Zixia in the next few days, to improve his pill concocting skills. Chapter 73. The path leading from the river to the seaside was overgrown with weeds. Yan Zixia and her great-granny would always fly through the air every time they came here. Ever since her great-granny handed Yu Qianqiu to her, she had never come here again. She knew what her great-granny was thinking. A man and a woman walked quietly by the river. Although it was not as fast as flying, Yanzixia was happy to walk slowly like this. The originally roadless river had already been vaguely stepped on by the two of them. Yu Qianqiu was always half a step behind her, his attitude very respectful. Walking in front, Yanzixia bit her lips. During the time they were together, they had almost never talked about anything else. As they walked slowly, she wanted to speak a few times, but once she opened her mouth, she couldn't think of anything else. In the end, she didn't say anything. She wanted to take the initiative to express goodwill. But because of her high and mighty status, she couldn't take the initiative to lower her stance. She wasn't used to doing this. Should she take the initiative or not? This question was constantly in her mind. Actually, Yu Qianqiu's mind was also spinning nonstop. He was thinking about how to ask Yanzixia. He had always been her assistant. He didn't know if she would agree to let him personally refine pills. Damn it. He had already done something as shameless as kneeling. Why would he be afraid of asking this? Yu Qianqiu cleared his throat and chuckled. Senior apprentice Aunt Yen, this disciple wants to ask you for a favor. Yanzixia hated this form of address more and more. It pulled apart the seniority of two people who were about the same age. Stopping, she frowned and said a little stiffly, "What is it?" She immediately regretted saying it. Why couldn't she change her tone? This disciple is very envious of senior apprentice Ant's alchemy skills. You see, this disciple has been following you for so long. Even if I don't have any merits, I have worked hard. This disciple also wants to have a taste of alchemy. Senior apprentice Ant, can you let me have a taste as well? Yu Qianqiu pleaded. Is that it? Yanzixia's tone was a little disappointed. Yu Qianqiu was really afraid that she wouldn't agree. He asked tentatively, Senior apprentice Ant, is that all right? Yanzixia was just about to speak when she suddenly thought that this was an opportunity. She paused for a moment and couldn't help but smile sweetly. Her beautiful smile was like a blooming flower. Yu Qianqiu was stunned and thought to himself, this girl is really hot. If I didn't have to follow Ma Jugu, this scary old lady, I would find a way to have a taste of her. Seeing Yu Qianqiu looking at her, as if he was about to drool, Yanzixia was overjoyed. If it was someone else looking at her like this, she would probably get angry. She had always been proud of her looks, but Yu Qianqiu had made her lose her confidence. She didn't know that Yu Qianqiu was worried about Ma Jugu. A man like Yu Qianqiu was definitely not a good person. He had absolutely no immunity to beautiful women. As long as he thought it was a beautiful woman, he would have the urge to flirt with her. As for whether he would really flirt with her, it was completely based on his own moral bottom line. This was also how he behaved and did things. There was no such thing as good or bad, whether he should do it or not. It was completely based on his own moral view that could be modified at any time. He could barely be regarded as a capricious gentleman. It couldn't be said that he didn't have morals. It was just that most of the time, his instinct was to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. This could be seen from what happened in the mulberry garden. In order to get the spiritual herb seeds, he once wanted to flirt with Yanzixia. But unfortunately, the conditions didn't allow it. When he was bored, he wanted to flirt with the beauties in the mulberry garden. But unfortunately, the conditions didn't allow it. He also wanted to flirt with the beautiful woman in the mulberry garden Lanbingxue. But sometimes people always had to face the reality. In front of absolute strength, it was better to honestly hide his thoughts. Although Chu Ping played a major role in kneeling in front of Ma Jugu, it couldn't be helped. Even if there was a little way, he wouldn't kneel. Sometimes, after all, face was not as practical as reality. According to a saying that he learned when he was a soldier in his previous life, flexible strategies and tactics were the magic weapon to defeat the enemy. At least after the incident, he comforted himself in this way. He felt that it was a smart move to kneel. Then why did Chu Pinger have a place in his heart for someone like him? Was it because of Chu Pinger's beauty? No, it was not. She was beautiful. He could flirt with her as much as he wanted. In his eyes, it was not a big deal. The reason was both simple and complicated. In every man's heart, there was a high ground that would be occupied by a woman sooner or later. The more messy a man experienced, the better he would protect this high ground. Sometimes, even he didn't know that it was difficult for others to touch it. Chu Pinger happened to succeed. For this kind of woman, men were often crazy. Some men could give up anything for this kind of woman, whether it was money, beautiful women, or power. They could give up all of these things that men loved most. Some people could even give up the throne and the country. In this case, would Yu Qianqiu only love Chu Ping, or for the rest of his life? Or would he never cheat on her, and only be loyal to her physically? Well, God knows. You can make your own judgment. But in terms of feelings, I can guarantee it. Yan Zixia saw that the person she had a crush on was attracted by her appearance, and her confidence returned. Her thoughts also became clear. Don't you want to refine pills by yourself? Okay, I promise you. Yu Qianqiu happily bowed and said, Thank you, Martial Aunt Yan. Thank you, Martial Aunt Yan. Don't thank me first. I still have something to ask you. It won't be too late to thank me after you answer me to my satisfaction. Yan Zixia smiled. Her full breast subconsciously puffed out. This was one of the things she was most proud of, and also one of the ways she thought she could attract men. But for her to do such a thing to a man, it could be considered unprecedented. Unfortunately, Yu Qianqiu also didn't notice her seductive action. He was muttering in his heart, If you aren't a family, you won't enter the same house. This saying is true. This grandfather and grandson pair are always the same when they agree to something. There was no helping it. He was the one asking for help, so he had to hold it in even if he had any opinions. He respectfully said, Martial Aunt, please ask. After Yan Zixia puffed out her chest, her face turned red. Fortunately, the other party didn't notice. She was vexed and a little disappointed. She took a breath and calmed herself down. She slowly said, I know you are Ong Guangsung's Yu Qianqiu. Don't deny it, but don't be in a hurry to deny it. Let me finish first. I don't have any ulterior motives for saying this. I won't tell anyone about your matter. You can rest assured. Damn it. How can I rest assured when my weakness is in your hands? Yu Qianqiu's face twitched and said, If you have anything to say, ask quickly. Since his identity had already been exposed, there was no need to be polite and call him Martial Aunt. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.